Chapter 274. 3 consecutive draws. My knees are hurting. Wife, come out and look at God. There are no ads. Han Xiao was shocked. He had only put 3 purple equipment in this batch, and he did not do anything behind the scenes. However, all of them were picked by one person. This luck was unbelievable. He almost wanted to skin half a cigarette when lonely to see if it was Bennett hiding inside. Half a cigarette when lonely was in a daze. At this moment, so poor that only has money walked over with admiration. Do you have some kind of trick? Teach me, I can pay. So poor that only has money's eyes were shining. What trick? I'm just lucky. Half a cigarette when lonely quickly waved his hands. King of single draws blacked out. In front of luck, all metaphysics was bullsh *t. After selling the chests, Han Xiao left. Half a cigarette when lonely was immediately surrounded by players. Some believed that he had a special trick to open the chests, and some had bad intentions. However, the main city was a safe zone, so they did not dare to act rashly. Friend, are you selling purple equipment? The price is negotiable. Not selling. Half a cigarette when lonely subconsciously answered. He turned around and saw that it was a male player who spoke. When he saw the other party's ID, he suddenly took a deep breath. Guild leader, Morning Snow, Twilight Frost. The 4 biggest esport clubs in China were Temple of God, Long Sky, Dynasty, and Fried Eggplants with Fish. Ancient Dynasty was the official guild of Dynasty. Temple of God's Ligu was ranked 2nd in the official Chinese player rankings, and the first was Dynasty's signature. Ancient Dynasty followed the club's low-key style, and they were considered an exception among the top clubs. However, no one dared to look down on them. I see. Morning Snow, Twilight Frost scratched his chin and casually said, Do you want to join our guild? Half a cigarette when lonely was pleasantly surprised and quickly agreed. Morning Snow, Twilight Frost directly sent the guild invitation over. After half a cigarette when lonely agreed, a new guild title appeared on his interface. Half a cigarette when lonely felt that joining a top club so easily was unreal. He said that he hated guilds because he had applied to join some guilds but was always rejected. However, those small guilds were nothing compared to the Qinyu dynasty. Now that the guild leader of a major guild had personally invited him, half a cigarette in the loneliness felt his depression dissipate. His whole body was relaxed, and he felt as if he was floating on air. The guilds monopolize the resources, but this kind of lucky draw is a chance for normal players like us to make a comeback. This is the only way we can get high-level equipment with very little capital. Black Phantom's mechanical box is a blessing. Half a cigarette when lonely was secretly happy. The popularity continued to rise, and the Blue Star forums were discussing this enthusiastically. Players posted all kinds of posts, and some of them gave examples to calculate the drop rate of the chests. Below that, there were players who used the King of Single Draw as a negative example, lashing out at the King of Single Draw's scarred heart. Even so poor that all that was left with money did not escape this kind of treatment. His story of getting 100 blue equipment in a row was shared by the players gloatingly. Half a cigarette when lonely's godly luck was mentioned. After a few more chests, half a cigarette when lonely's luck was still as good as before. He got 2 more purple equipment, which attracted a lot of envy. With so many purple equipment in his hands, his combat power would definitely not be weak. Everyone also realized that he had joined the Qinyu Dynasty Guild, and they could only be envious. The other guilds all regretted that they did not make the first move. Han Xiao was tempted and wanted to pull half a cigarette when lonely into the team, but he gave up after thinking about it. Luck was something that could be good, and bad at times was not reliable. Half a cigarette when lonely's standard did not meet the recruitment criteria that he had set. Compared to illusory luck, Han Technician preferred real ability. Other than the posts on the forums, there were also people calculating all the items that had been dropped from the chests so far, such as mechanical equipment, useful materials, and parts. As a scientific introduction post, the large number of good items attracted even more players. Players from all continents were very envious of the chest's opening event in Sanctuary 3. More players from the southern continent came over because of the reputation. The players who were recruited by the expedition team could not wait to return. They thought that there would be many missions and opportunities in the war, but the situation changed completely. After Han Shao stole the German organization's secrets, the German organization did not even put up a decent fight, so the players could not even do anything. The players from the Western continent and Northern continent hated that they were not born in the Southern continent. They wished that they could grow wings and fly to Sanctuary 3. Because of the war, cross-continental flights were temporarily closed, so they could only look but not touch. The players from Andrea were the unluckiest group of people. It felt like nothing good had happened to them ever since they had created their character. The chest's opening event was a huge success, so Han Shao started a new event to strengthen his position. This time, the method was to release a type of prize pool mission on a regular basis as another regular event in the main city. The response was not bad, and the players saw more benefits. At the same time, it increased the variety of activities in the main city. Han Shao took out some material and guided Pork Bun to make a new episode, introducing the experience and deeds of Han Shao in more detail than the posts on the forums. This deepened his impression in the hearts of the players again, so the players had a deeper understanding of his deeds. It also indirectly promoted Sanctuary 3. Han Shao valued the response of the players, so he paid attention to the forums in his free time. In the eyes of Hela and the others, he seemed to be in a daze. A new episode has been released, and the subtitle is actually The War of the Blue Star. The Galaxy Times rarely uses a single planet as the theme, but this time, it's focusing on the Blue Star. I don't remember there being such an episode in my previous life. Han Zhao's eyes sparkled, and he clicked on the video. "Hello, players," the male host said. "This is the Galaxy Times, dedicated to sharing first-hand game information and protecting your gaming career. Little Chun, I've been learning to play an instrument recently," the female host said. "Really? What instrument are you learning?" "Chio. Let me show you. Guess what I'm playing?" The female host took out her guitar and played for a while. The melody was very familiar, and it seemed to be a famous song. After she finished playing, the female host asked, "Little Chun, can you guess what I'm playing?" "You're playing the guitar." The opening joke of every episode was as cold as always. Han Shao felt like his bladder was about to freeze. After this segment, they finally entered the main event. The two hosts first talked about the recent trends in the professional circle and the problems that the players had encountered, then changed the topic and cut to the main topic. Recently, the Blue Star events have been happening frequently. The Six Nations and the Germinal organization have a worldwide conflict. Players have experienced it personally, and there is no doubt that this is a main storyline event of a planet. Compared to other planets, the Blue Star main storyline broke out first, which is very typical. Therefore, in this episode, we will analyze the Blue Star main storyline war, summarize the characteristics of the main storyline event, and speculate about its future impact. Hearing this, Han Shao finally understood why this episode appeared. Under his operation, the main storyline war between the Six Nations and the Germinal organization broke out more than a year earlier, and now was only the early stage of the players. The main storyline of most of the novice planets was still in preparation. Blue Star, where a global war broke out, naturally became the most eye-catching planet, which was very good material for the show. The two hosts first introduced the background of the Blue Star planet, then began to analyze. The war has lasted for nearly 2 months, and it has entered the final stage. Now, the Germinal organization is on the verge of defeat. The impact of the war on the planet's environment is also very obvious. The power structure has changed, and a large faction of players is facing the crisis of destruction. The players of the Germinal organization are in a worse situation. There are a few possibilities as to what they will do after the war. Maybe they will become the remnants of the Germinal organization, join the Six Nations, or leave the faction and become wanderers. From this incident, we can see the characteristics of the main storyline. It has major changes, a large scale, far-reaching impact, and so on. However, although the Blue Star players participated in the war main storyline, their role was not obvious. They played the role of ordinary soldiers, and their impact on the events was limited. Of course, we also saw more possibilities. The average level of the players is low now, but it should be different when their level is higher. Therefore, players from other planets can look forward to their own main storyline events. Because the participation of the players was not high, we suspect that the Blue Star main storyline was too rushed. From the perspective of the players, it was more like an interlude. Based on this idea, our program team summarized the information dug up by the players on the forum and found an interesting phenomenon. Please take a look. These are the two possibilities that we have concluded for the development of the Blue Star main storyline. At this time, two tables appeared in the video with different content written on them. They wrote about the transformative events before the expedition war began. Han Xiao raised his eyebrows. One of the tables had his deeds, such as escaping from the Germinal organization, leaking information that caused the Germinal organization's base to collapse, and so on. These were all in the current storyline. He had exposed his identity, and this information had been shared with the players through different channels. In the tables, his deeds were marked in red. The other table removed his deeds, and the result of the deduction was completely different. It believed that the conflict between the Six Nations and the Germinal organization would start from the bases on the various continents, and all the players would be able to participate in it. The players would be able to grow in it, and the war would only start after they reached higher levels. The war would last several times longer than the current one. Interesting, this is very similar to the storyline in my previous life. To be able to notice this, their logic and observation skills are very detailed. Indeed, there are many crouching tigers and hidden dragons among the players. Han Zhao's interest was piqued, and he continued watching. As you can see, the conclusions of the two tables are completely different, the male host said. One is the current storyline, and the other is the predicted storyline. However, the predicted storyline seems to have more characteristics of the main storyline. So, what caused the difference in the results? Chapter 275. The two hosts analyzed the development of the main storyline in the two tables and focused on the theme of the show. They used Blue Star as an example to explain the characteristics of the main storyline to the players. There was also a discussion on the bullet screen. Players from other planets learned about the character Han Xiao from the show. Han Xiao raised his eyebrows. This was not the first time his name appeared. After all, he had been around for so long, so it was normal for people to report about him. It was not difficult to understand why the Galaxy Times had deduced another possibility for the main storyline. When he revealed his real identity, he also exposed his deeds. As long as the players tried to remove these deeds, it would not be difficult to logically deduce the original storyline. However, the number of players was huge, so it was hard to guarantee that no one would think of this. From the perspective of the players, Han Xiao played a crucial role in the main storyline. Now that the storyline had been set, the other possibility was just a speculation. It could only be used to highlight his role in the storyline and make more players interested in him. I am very famous in Blue Star, but my fame is limited in the eyes of the players from other planets. I pushed the storyline forward and made the main storyline explode. Being chosen as the theme by the Galaxy Times is equivalent to indirectly promoting my fame, Han Xiao said. In summary, Black Phantom played a role in pushing the storyline forward in the main storyline, the female host said. According to this example and the player's information, we can boldly speculate that every main storyline will have a core character like Han Xiao, who could be called the main character of the storyline, the main character of the planet. It can even be said that the current main storyline of each planet is derived from the main character of the planet. Han Xiao scratched his head. In fact, the original main character of the storyline was the leader. Forget it, it is not important. In theory, every NPC can extend the storyline, the male host said. Powerful NPCs with rich experience and deep backgrounds can naturally extend the storyline of more diverse events. The male host changed the topic. So, the limitations of the storyline characters are the limitations of the layout and the map. Take Black Phantom, for example. He is the main character of a planet's main storyline. But will he still have other main storyline scenes in the future? Obviously, the probability is not high. His range of activity is limited to the novice planets. When the interstellar map is opened, the once important people will eventually disappear into the crowd. As for those NPCs who have stepped into the stars, they would be able to extend to greater and more events. In comparison, the novice planet with the most potential is naturally the Void Demon's Winterfrost planet, which is closely connected to the galactic faction. There is a high chance that a new storyline of a larger scale will be seamlessly connected with the changes in the version. As for low-level surface civilizations such as the Blue Star and the Long Song planet, the prospects are not very optimistic. All sorts of comments flashed through the video. Some agreed, some disagreed. After analyzing Blue Star's situation, the next segment was an interview with a professional player. Han Xiao didn't continue watching. He thought that the show was praising him, but he didn't expect that it would end up being used as a negative example to step on him. However, this analysis made sense. It was just like how the bosses in the beginner's village abused the players many times in the early stages, but when the players reached a higher level, these bosses were not even as good as a high-level monster. Han Xiao knew that Blue Star was indeed a novice planet with a low starting point. However, understanding was one thing. This was another. Thinking of his plan, Han Xiao smiled playfully. Let's wait and see. Bang! The twisted door of the potion room was smashed into the room, smashing all the instruments on the two tables. Yeching, who had her back to the door, turned around in surprise. At the door, a figure with long red hair, Hella walked in with a cold expression. What do you want? Yeching was vigilant. She flicked her finger, and green buds spread out from the cabinets around them, turning into tough and slender vines. They swayed slightly like poisonous snakes that were about to pounce on them. Hella's body was surrounded by a dark red aura, and her eyes flashed red. She said coldly, "Hand over the things." Yeching frowned and took a step to the side, revealing a row of test tubes on the table. They were all filled with bright red liquid. She shook her head and said, "You mean these potions? These are all strong healing potions cultivated from your sister's cell tissue. Do you want to try them? The effect is pretty good." Hella did not hesitate. She raised her hands, and a dark red light shot out. Yeching cursed in her heart and hurriedly protected the potions, controlling the plants to block. Bang! The dark red light was as sharp as a blade, and the vines were cut cleanly. The juice splattered everywhere. Yeching hurriedly dodged. The wall beside her was cut open, and dust sprayed out. Lunatic! Yeching gritted her teeth and blocked. The dark red light and the green plants kept colliding. The potion room was torn apart by both parties. Dust filled the air, and the floor was a mess. The guards outside were shocked. They raised their guns, but did not know who to shoot. Go and inform His Excellency Black Phantom. The captain of the guards hurriedly moved. Just as he took 2 steps, he saw a figure approaching quickly from the end of the road. It was Han Xiao. Han Xiao was monitoring the potion room at all times. When he saw Yeching and Hella fighting, he immediately rushed to the scene and shouted, "Stop!" Yeching was sweating. Her Esper ability was not as strong as Hella's, and she was worried that she would be injured if she stopped. "I will stop if she stops." Hella's face was cold. She was determined to kill Yeching. Han Xiao frowned. His blue mechanical force gathered on the sole of his foot. He stomped his foot, and the mechanical force seeped into the ground. The ground suddenly rumbled, and the ground in 8 directions of the potion room cracked open. Buzz! 8 metal drills broke out of the ground, making mechanical clicking sounds. They quickly expanded into small turrets, and the barrels all turned to aim at the 2 of them. The trap-type portable turret was a new type of machine buried in the important areas of the sanctuary. It could be activated through the chip program and the user's mechanical force. "I think you forgot whose territory this is," Han Xiao said in a deep voice. Hella clenched her teeth, retracted her hand, and stepped back. Her eyes were cold. Yeching heaved a sigh of relief. She rubbed her temples in pain. She had been hit by Hella's mental shockwave a few times, and her head was hurting. "You didn't keep your promise to protect my sister." Hella suddenly turned around and stared at Han Xiao. Han Xiao sighed helplessly. "You overreacted. Yetching snorted, took out the potion, and said, "These are the potions I collected from Aurora's hair. This is called making the best use of everything. I didn't hurt your sister. Why are you so anxious?" "That won't do," Hella said coldly. Yetching's behavior was too similar to the germinal organization's. She was worried that the similar scene would remind Aurora of her painful experience. The two of them did not back down. Han Xiao had a headache. It was not easy to solve a conflict between his own people. At this time, Aurora rushed over in her wheelchair. Bear Cub was lying on her lap, bouncing up and down. At this time, her complexion was much better than it had been a month ago. Her dry hair had become soft and smooth again, and her shriveled body had begun to gain weight. Her expression was radiant, and her face had become healthy and lustrous. The ability that had been suppressed for a long time had begun to take effect. In just a short month, Aurora had returned to the physical condition of a normal person. "Sister, why did you fight with the doctor?" Aurora asked anxiously. Yetching glared at Hella and told her the whole story. Aurora was enlightened. She blinked and said, "It's just some hair. As long as I can help Uncle Han, I don't mind." In the past, only her sister was good to her. Now, Han Xiao was also good to her. Aurora was very willing to contribute her role. Only then would she feel more at ease and feel that she could repay Han Xiao's kindness. Han Xiao did not comment. He knew that Yetching's experiment was just some fallen hair. It was not too much, so he turned a blind eye to it. However, Hella's reaction was too extreme. Aurora smiled brightly. "Sister, don't worry. I'm not that weak." Hella was silent for a while. She turned around and left. She said in a low voice, "I know." This little episode came to an end. Han Xiao asked the guards to clean up the scene. Yetching walked to him and said with a smile, "I didn't know that there were so many cannons near the potion lab. You were spying on me, right?" Han Xiao glanced at her. Don't worry. I'm not that untactful. After all, I'm a tool that you exchange for. Tools are meant to be manipulated by others." Yetching played with her hair and said with a playful smile, "Oh." Han Xiao turned around and walked away. Yetching's smile froze on her face. What kind of reaction was that? He was not angry or apologetic. He did not even threaten her. Was he that indifferent? The moon and stars were hanging low. The night was dark. After a day of manufacturing, Han Xiao stored the goods in the secret base. On the way back to his house, he suddenly saw a graceful figure sitting on the roof next door. The gentle moonlight illuminated half of the body. It was Hella. She was holding her chin and looking at the moon. It seemed that she had been sitting there for a while. Han Xiao thought for a while and jumped up. Hella heard the sound but did not turn around. She asked faintly, "What are you doing up here? I can take a look. Why are you not sleeping at night?" Hella snorted and did not answer. Han Xiao also sat down. He shook his head and said, "Your reaction today is too extreme. You didn't seem to be so impulsive before." Hella frowned. "What does it have to do with you?" "Well said. What does it have to do with me?" Han Xiao touched his chin and murmured, "Why didn't you say this when I saved your sister?" Chapter 276. Confused, Han Xiao took out a cigarette, put it in his mouth, and took out a lighter from his pocket. "That's easy to solve. You can bring your sister back to the germinal organization, and I guarantee that you won't have this kind of boring feeling again." Hella glared at him, paused, and said to herself, "I didn't take good care of my sister in the past and let her go through so much torture. It's all my fault. In order to protect her, I kept training myself. Even when I think about the killings in the past, I have never regretted it. The more blood on my hands, the more relieved I feel. Only then can I wash away the guilt I feel toward my sister and prove that I am protecting my sister. When I was in the germinal organization, my sister and I could only see each other once in a while. I knew that she yearned for a life in the outside world, so every time we met, I would tell her stories and share my experiences. Now that she has a new life, new friends, and a pet, she doesn't need my stories anymore," Hella said softly. Han Xiao did not light up the cigarette for a long time, so he took out his gun and fired a shot into the air. He lit up the cigarette with a hot barrel, took a puff, and could not help but say, "That bear is mine. Saving her has always been my wish." Now that my wish has been fulfilled. Hela ignored him and said in a low voice, she doesn't need my protection anymore. Hela looked at her palm and said softly, in the past, I couldn't wait to use all my time to train my Esper ability and make myself stronger. Now that the Germinal organization is about to be destroyed, my sister and I are safe. Power doesn't seem to be important to me anymore. So, I used all the time I used to train to accompany my sister. This has always been my biggest wish. Hela suddenly clenched her fist and crushed the stream of light. She lowered her eyes and said softly, but why does this kind of dream life make me feel lost? It's obviously my wish, but it makes me feel empty. I hate this feeling, Han Xiao said, being in danger all year round. You won't be used to suddenly relaxing. This is a typical war wound. Of course, I'm more inclined to another possibility. You have the blood of war flowing in your bones, and your cells desire to fight. Bloodthirst is your nature. A peaceful life is a slow poison to you, and you will only gradually lose your courage. Hela had a strange expression. You sound like you're trying to lure me to do something bad. What else do you want me to say? Comforting words? Han Xiao shook his head. I'm not going to say that kind of nonsense. A person like you doesn't need comforting. Your sister is your sister, and you are you. You don't need to suppress your nature for her, and she doesn't want you to become different from yourself. Don't find excuses. I can see that what you really want is to fight and kill. Pursuing power is your instinct. This world is bigger than you think. Don't think that I can beat 10 of you with one hand. In the entire universe, there are many people who are stronger than me. How can you beat 10 of me? Hela expressed her dissatisfaction. Han Zhao's face suddenly turned cold, and his murderous intent burst out. The sudden change shocked Hela. She hurriedly stepped back and unconsciously used her Esper ability. The dark red light flickered, and her face was full of vigilance. Maybe one day, I will capture your sister like the Germinal organization. At that time, if you don't have the power to resist me, So, become stronger, or you will regret it. Han Zhao's face was expressionless, and he retracted his aura. However, Hela's heart could not slow down. Just a moment ago, her intuition told her that Han Xiao was not joking like usual. He was very likely to be serious. It was as if the fangs under the disguise were exposed. In just a moment, Hela felt a chill down her spine. If you need, I can make some sparring robots. Or you can learn from Yeching and find some Inhumans to practice with. If there's nothing else, I'll leave first. I'm sleepy. I haven't finished this cigarette yet. I'll leave it here. Han Xiao jumped off the roof and walked back to his house. When Han Zhao's back disappeared from her sight, Hela retracted her gaze and let out a long sigh. Looking at the slowly burning cigarette on the roof, she hesitantly picked it up and took a deep breath. She slowly closed her eyes, exhaled the smoke, and savored the taste of the cigarette. After a while, she opened her eyes. The uncertainty and confusion disappeared, leaving only coldness and indifference. He's really a monster, Hela muttered to herself. Suddenly, she shook her head and laughed. Me too. Han Xiao built machines every day, trained Mad Blade and the other 3, and harvested the experience of the players. The experience accumulated on the interface steadily increased. His life was rich, and time passed quickly. On Galaxy Calendar Year 688, December 7th, the Frontline finally sent back the latest changes in the war. The Germinal organization only had the territory around their headquarters left. All the other bases had been destroyed. Han Xiao received a notice that Bennett invited him to meet him at Sanctuary 1. The war will end with the destruction of the Germinal organization. The situation has been reshuffled. We, the Darknet, have to reconsider our position, Bennett said over the phone. After waiting for so long, the war was finally coming to an end. The Six Nations did not disappoint and successfully forced the Germinal organization into a dead end. Han Xiao arranged the affairs of Sanctuary 3 and left for Sanctuary 1. Half a day later, the helicopter landed on the helipad of Sanctuary 1. Bennett had been waiting for a long time. He smiled and said, "You're the first to arrive. That's not like you." Han Xiao heard that, turned around, walked back to the helicopter and said, "Take off and come back when there's no more fuel." Bennett did not know whether to laugh or cry. He went forward and pulled Han Shao off the helicopter. The board meeting will be held after the war officially ends. It should be in the next few days. How many days exactly? That's hard to say. The situation now is a bit complicated. Bennett lowered his voice. The situation is a bit tense. Han Zhao's eyes flashed. The two of them came to the meeting room. After closing the door, Han Shao said in a deep voice, "Tell me in detail." Bennett took out the intelligence and explained, "The current situation is like this. The wings of the Germinal organization have been cut off. All the troops have retreated to the headquarters. The Six Nations have surrounded them, but they are very far away and have no intention of attacking the headquarters." Han Shao pondered and said, "Since all the bases of the Germinal organization have been removed, the headquarters is the only target left. Wouldn't the Six Nations be done with a few hundred missiles? Indeed, without all the sub-bases, the anti-missile capability of the Germinal organization's headquarters will not be able to cope with the continuous bombardment of the Six Nations. Even if their real headquarters is hidden underground, it will be bombed and collapse." However, the Six Nations did not do that. They just surrounded them and did not attack. The reason is complicated. Bennett took out another document and said, "Because of your intelligence, a large number of nuclear warheads of the Germinal organization have been removed. The remaining nuclear warheads have been transported to the headquarters. Due to the single location, it is easy to intercept them, and the Germinal organization has lost their bargaining chip. However, there are a lot of nuclear warheads. Even if they explode in one place, it will cause a chain reaction. According to the meteorologists of various countries, if this number of nuclear warheads explodes at the same time in the next 5 to 15 years, the radiation will cause the global climate to become very bad. Andrea, as the area with the highest radiation concentration, will become a real-life forbidden zone. For humanitarian reasons, the Six Nations have to migrate the remaining population of Andrea after the war. Secondly, when the Germinal organization's troops retreated, they captured a large number of wanderers as hostages. It seems that they want the Six Nations to be cautious. If they want to bomb their headquarters, these innocent wanderers will die with them." Bennett sighed. Thus, the Six Nations had different opinions. Raylan and Theseus suggested to ignore the climate disaster and the safety of the hostages and directly bomb the Germinal organization. Star Dragon did not say anything. Maple suggested to persuade the Germinal organization to surrender. Hesla suggested to use ground forces to try and rescue the hostages. Ordina. They said that they were worried about the climate and the hostages, and they opposed all offensive measures. Han Shao was confused. "I can understand the rest, but what is Ordina trying to do? After fighting for so long, they still want to retreat?" Bennett knocked on the table and said helplessly, "The leader of Ordina is in his last term this year. They have many political parties, and many people are eyeing his position. If they can delay the war until next year, they can use wartime policy as an excuse to skip the election and directly get reelected." Han Shao was speechless. "That's crazy. So what is the Six Nations leaning toward now? Surround them but not attack, and try to persuade them to surrender. The Six Nations anti-missile strike is activated 24 hours a day. If the nuclear silos of the Germinal organization launch any nuclear warheads, they will immediately intercept them and directly bomb the Germinal organization's headquarters. Of course, this is the worst result. So, the Six Nations are now giving the Germinal organization an ultimatum, hoping that they will give up resistance, hand over the hostages, and surrender. They are trying to reason with them and promise not to kill those who surrender." Chapter 277. The headquarters were like a silent black mountain range, shrouded in a deathly silence. Abandoned vehicles were everywhere in the open air, and the smell of fuel and smoke mixed together to create a pungent smell. Countless pairs of dazed and confused eyes could be seen through the gaps in the windows of the buildings. All the remaining soldiers were hiding in the buildings, and the atmosphere was gloomy. Although the encirclement troops of the Six Nations could not be seen at the end of the horizon, everyone knew that countless missiles had locked onto the headquarters and would hit them at any moment. They would turn into skyrocketing fireworks, burning and purifying everything. No one knew what their fate would be in the future. Everything depended on the final decision of the germinal organization. If they surrendered, there might still be a glimmer of hope. After all, not everyone was willing to die. In the central control room of the underground headquarters, the screen showed the current situation. The blue represented the germinal organization's headquarters, and the red represented the Six Nations headquarters. The rest of the continent was filled with red. The masked leader stood at the forefront with his hands behind his back, looking at the screen silently. Behind him, all the upper echelons quietly exchanged glances. No one spoke, and the silence was eerie. "What do you plan to do?" one of the upper echelons asked hesitantly. The leader closed his eyes. When everyone was anxious, he said with a hoarse voice, "Launch all the nuclear bombs." All the upper echelons trembled. A bald upper echelon with high authority could not help but say, "The Six Nations have locked onto us. It is impossible to die together. This is suicide." "What? You want to beg for mercy from the Six Nations?" The leader's tone did not change. "Don't forget what the germinal organization was built for. There is no defeat, only death." The upper echelons were all people who hated the Six Nations, but not everyone could remain unmoved in the face of death. Moreover, in their opinion, death was completely futile. Even if the Six Nations' promise of sparing the lives of those who surrendered was not credible, having a sliver of hope was better than having no hope at all. "I disagree." The bald upper echelon stood up and shouted. The leader turned around, glanced at each of the faces, and said coldly, "You, or all of you?" Some of the upper echelons looked at each other without compromising. Some lowered their heads, but without exception, they all answered with silence. In the face of life and death, the leader and all the upper echelons had different opinions. It was as if there was a gap between the two sides. "What if I insist?" The leader said calmly. The bald man said in a deep voice, "Launching a nuclear bomb requires two special keys: system authority, your fingerprints, and your iris. You have the authority, but you only have one key. The other key is with the deputy commander. He is on our side." The leader glanced around. "Where is he?" "Of course not. I won't give you any chance." The leader shook his head. "It seems that you have already made your decision. Don't be impulsive. We still have a chance to make a comeback. Don't throw away your life for nothing." The bald man tried to persuade, but after saying a few words, he suddenly paused and widened his eyes in disbelief. As he spoke, the leader slowly took out two keys to launch the nuclear bomb from his pocket, including the key that should have belonged to the deputy commander. How did you? Oh my God, put it down. Why is the key with you? Where's the vice commander?" The expressions of the upper echelons changed drastically as they started to speak incoherently. The leader gripped the key and remained silent. "Hand over the key. We can't let you do whatever you want." The bald man tried his best to control the muscles on his face to not show any expression of anger or panic. His voice was trembling, and his other hand was secretly gesturing behind his back. The leader shook his head, looked at the people indifferently, and said, "My ergo, 5 days ago, you contacted Maple privately. Doramund, or Dina, and you made a small agreement. Lanu, Raylan agreed to provide you with protection." He named most of the people in the room in one breath. Looking at the shocked faces of the people, he slowly said, "Your ending after surrendering will naturally be different from the other germinal soldiers. So, there is no need to be so righteous. Do what you want." The faces of the upper echelons changed, and the fear of being seen rose from the bottom of their hearts. Although the previous leader was frightening, they could still roughly guess. However, ever since the war started, the leader became more and more unfathomable. No one knew what he was thinking. To be precise, after Zero escaped from the encirclement, the leader changed. It was as if he had become an unfathomable deep pool. The battle was losing, but he was still as calm as water. It was as if even desperate situations could not arouse his anger. The door opened, and dozens of executive officers walked in. They silently surrounded the leader, and the upper echelons backed away. These executive officers were all their people. Since the start of the war, the German organization's executive officers had suffered heavy casualties, and the upper echelons were consciously protecting their own people. In a large organization, everyone had their own secret plans and personal strength. The unity of the German organization came from hatred, not loyalty to a specific person. No one said anything. The bald leader gave a look, and the executive officers were ready to move. All kinds of abilities and auras lit up. In the colorful light, the leader sighed. "I will send you to see the deputy commander." Far away from the headquarters was the joint base of the Six Nations. Countless armed forces were on standby, and fighter jets with missiles were hovering in the air. The roar of the engines cut across the sky, and the sound waves and vibrations swept across the sky. The tents on the ground and the armor plates of the vehicles shook slightly. The ground missile vehicles were ready to launch at any time. All the satellites and detection devices were constantly monitoring the missile silos and the situation in the air. Once a black object rose into the sky, they could intercept it immediately and let it explode in the air. They would also use their last resort to pour down all the missiles and burn the German organization headquarters to ashes. In the war conference room, the representatives of the Six Nations gathered and waited anxiously. There are 7 hours, 32 minutes, 52 seconds until the ultimatum, and the German organization has not responded yet. The maple officer kept looking at the clock. "I think we should extend the ultimatum to let the German organization reconsider and not act rashly," the representative of Ordina said. No one responded. The Raylan officer said with a cold face, "We have contacted 4 of the German organization's upper echelons privately. They're trying to persuade the German organization leader." The other countries nodded. They all did the same thing. In such a desperate situation, many of the German organization's upper echelons were willing to make a deal in exchange for safety. The condition of the Six Nations was naturally for the German organization to surrender, and the best result was to let the hostages live. It has been 1 hour and 20 minutes since the last call, and there is no new news. Continue to wait. We have time. The various officials discussed the current situation. They were in an invincible position, and the German organization was given a choice. All they could do was wait. The Hesla officer pondered and said, "Who is the German organization leader?" According to the Darknet, the German organization leader came from the destroyed Golan, and the predecessor of the German organization was Mimic. "We have looked through all the files, but we still could not find the exact identity of the German organization leader." Bennett had passed the information Hannes had found to the Six Nations, thinking that with the power of the Six Nations, they should be able to find more details. However, the Six Nations could not do anything about it. The German organization leader was like a ghost without a past, and there was no record of it in the mountains of files and documents. The information Hannes had found was all there was. "Wasn't Golan destroyed by Raylan? Do you have any information?" the Star Ragan officer asked. The Raylan officer shook his head. "We even checked the list of civilians who received and executed the Golan people, but there was no match. We sent people to the original Golan area, but there was still nothing. I suspect that the Darknet's information is true." Chapter 278. Huff. His heavy breathing was like a broken bellows, mixed with the sticky feeling of blood and phlegm climbing up his throat. "Ha!" The mask stained with blood fell to the ground. Leaning against the corner of the table, one could see that the room was full of holes and scars of battle. Dozens of corpses were lying on the ground quietly, and the pool of blood was gradually expanding. In the entire central control room, only the leader was still standing. All the executive officers had died under his fist. The expressions of fear were still frozen on their faces, and they were no longer breathing. The leader spat out a mouthful of blood and took a deep breath. The thick smell of blood in the room irritated his nose. He suddenly coughed violently and only stopped coughing after 2 whole minutes. The fierce battle had triggered his internal injuries. In the ambush battle more than a month ago, he had been seriously injured by Han Xiao. He had not had time to rest, and in the end, it became an internal injury. Every time he felt a faint pain, he could not help but think of Han Xiao. It was all because of Han Xiao that he was in such a situation. Until now, he was still full of hatred, but this intense emotion could not be stirred up anymore. Only emptiness was left. The leader came in front of the central control panel and adjusted the nuclear launch option. He then took off his gloves and verified his fingerprint, iris, authorization, and passcode. 2 keys were inserted into the holes. As long as they were rotated 180 degrees, the launch would be activated. At the last step, his scarred fingers held the keys, but he did not turn them. The leader leaned against the chair and looked up. His eyes were not focused, as if he was in a daze. No one knew what he was thinking. Beep, beep, beep. A small image appeared in the corner of the screen. It was a call request, and the caller was 0. The leader pressed accept without any expression. Han Zhao's face appeared on the screen. Seeing the corpses all over the floor, Han Xiao raised his eyebrows. He had initiated the call to see the germinal organization's attitude and to see the leader for the last time. However, this scene made him understand the situation. He shook his head and said, "Looks like you have already made up your mind." The leader's eyes were filled with disappointment. "I didn't think that I would lose to you in the end. You ant, one wrong step after another. Everything I had was destroyed by you. What do you want to do now? Do you want to confirm your achievements? I'm right here. You can look as you please. My life and the destruction of the germinal organization will add a thick stroke to your achievements. You're the winner, so you naturally have the right to admire your spoils of war. I told you this space is very big. This planet is just a speck of dust. No one in the universe cares about what happens here." Han Xiao shook his head. The great enemy had been dealt with, but his expression was very calm. After all, he was a man who looked at the sea of stars. He slowly said, "I just feel that after doing so many things, I still have to hold it all in before I die. How unbearable. You want me to confide in my mortal enemy?" The corners of the leader's mouth twitched, and his ferocious appearance became even more hideous. He lazily leaned back in his chair and relaxed his body. "It is indeed very interesting." Han Xiao shrugged and went straight to the point. "What's the deal with Destiny's Child?" The leader laughed loudly and only stopped after a while. He shook his head and said, "Destiny's Child is just a pitiful worm. He can see the future and influence fate, but he can't control his own life and death. He is destined to be a tool in the hands of others. You also have the ability to predict. Maybe Destiny's Child will end up like you." Han Xiao did not comment and said, "Tell me about yourself. You seem to be from Golan?" The leader's expression changed, and he mumbled, "You found out." "Yes, I used to be from Golan. At that time, I was still a young man, hot-blooded and indignant. At that time, the mimic incident broke out in our country. I joined a resistance group. I marched, protested, and opposed. I wanted to save my country from a corrupt government. However, the war suddenly broke out. Raylan invaded. Under internal and external threats, my country was crushed. Everyone died. The leader suddenly gritted his teeth. Did you hear that? We were called internal troubles. Did I do wrong? Was resistance wrong? No. Our original intention was to fight for the rights that we deserved, all for the sake of making the motherland better. We were infinitely close to victory, and the dawn was right in front of us, but the war ruined everything. Golan was destroyed, and all my friends were executed. The best way to deal with such disobedient people was to eliminate them. The surviving citizens of Golan were like castrated livestock. They had no choice but to become docile and easier to control. Only a very few managed to escape, and I was one of them. I was not a big shot. I was just an ordinary young man who did not know where I should go. I was like a walking corpse until I saw the border of Golan being blocked by Raylan. The national flag that I was familiar with was burned and replaced by the national flag of Raylan. It was then that I woke up and I knew what kind of mission I had to carry. Although Golan was not perfect and had many flaws and darkness, it was still my country. The hatred of my country's destruction could only be an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. The leader exhaled deeply. His eyes drifted away, and the images of the past appeared before his eyes. However, in the current of time, a normal young man was nothing more than a duckweed, and his life was as fragile as an ant's. To pass through the war zone, I dragged my tired body from refugee camp after refugee camp. I was treated like a dog, numbly enduring a life without dignity, but my blood burned. No matter what kind of danger it was, I told myself to live on. Hatred filled my heart, and it never stopped beating. In the end, I successfully passed through the place where the battle was the fiercest. Without stopping or seeking shelter, I turned and headed for the wilderness. I knew that without power, there was no need to talk about revenge. Therefore, I survived in the wilderness and fought with the beasts. I treated myself as a piece of iron and trained myself. At this point, the leader pointed at the scars on his face and hands and said casually, 176 scars, and I exchanged them for power. Han Shao raised his eyebrows. So, you're really just a normal person? Why can't I be a normal person? The leader asked. After thinking about it, Han Shao nodded and signaled for the leader to continue his performance. The leader continued. When I was in the wilderness, I kept thinking. When I returned to the battlefield, I heard that mimics still existed. How ironic. A tool created for the rule of terror became the purest surviving Golan force. Therefore, a plan appeared in my mind. I assassinated the leader of Mimic and changed the name of the organization to Germinal. I hid and quietly developed. I also put on a mask. War is full of opportunities. Countless people lost their countries and became homeless. Therefore, I decided on the concept of Germinal and painted a pie in the sky for them to create a so-called new world. Ideals have always been able to drive the resonators. It was not that I used the people of the fallen country, but they were willing to be used by me. This was hatred. They did not even care if they could achieve their goal after sacrificing themselves. By raising my personal desire to the desire of a group, I could gain a lot of help. Germinal absorbed the nutrients of war and grew quickly into a towering tree, a giant monster. The leader's tone was full of hatred, but he also felt a sense of loss. The cause that he had been working so hard for had been destroyed. Other than anger, his feelings were extremely complicated. Then you appeared. Chapter 279. Han Shao said in a playful tone, compared to the pollution you have caused in the past and in the future, I think cutting down this tree is more environmentally friendly. In his previous life, no player had ever found out the origin of the leader. It was indeed difficult to find the true identity of a missing normal person in this chaotic era. After listening to the leader's story, Han Shao had a clearer understanding of him. The leader was a staunch patriot. He was one of the few Golan people who had luckily escaped Raylan's invasion. In order to obtain the power to take revenge, he took the initiative to seek a breakthrough at the edge of life and death. He grew from an ordinary person to one of the top supers on the planet. Now that he had no other choice, he would rather die than live in dishonor. It could be seen that the hatred had been branded in his bones and was very strong. The experiences of the planet's protagonists are indeed very legendary. Every protagonist-type character has a story that can be dug deeper, Han Shao thought to himself. When he was still very weak, the leader was like a mountain in front of him. Han Shao had no choice but to operate carefully and become stronger. Finally, he had the strength to face the enemy head-on and destroy the Germinal organization. The Germinal organization was the main antagonist of Planet Aquamarine in version 1.0. Han Shao had participated in this main storyline as a player in his previous life, but now that his identity had changed, he had played a huge role in it. The experience was completely different. Although Han Shao appeared very calm, mainly to prevent joy from turning into sorrow, it did not mean that he did not enjoy the fruits of victory. He still felt a sense of accomplishment. The leader shook his head and said, I didn't expect that an escaped test subject would become the biggest enemy. In fact, when you stole the secrets and broke through my ambush, I knew that the Germinal organization would definitely lose. I don't have the habit of waiting for death, but there's nothing I can do. It's just a final struggle. Because he had a premonition, no matter how bad the situation was, the leader was not surprised. He watched the organization that he had built slide into the abyss step by step with his own eyes. There were mixed feelings in his calm. To me, defeat means death. The Six Nations want to see me surrender. They want to receive all the secret knowledge that the Germinal organization has accumulated over the years. I will not let them get anything. Han Shao raised his eyebrows. Speaking of which, I heard that you've captured quite a number of hostages. If you detonate them, they're dead for sure. Furthermore, the nuclear explosion will affect the climate and worsen the natural environment of Blue Star. It's not good for the future of humanity. Are you sure you want to do this? The leader fell silent. Only the sound of heavy breathing could be heard from the speakers. Han Shao was not in a hurry. He stared at the screen calmly. After a while, the leader spoke in a deep voice. You want to persuade me to surrender? Han Shao shrugged. That's not my intention. You don't look like someone who would listen to advice, but the person opposite me wants me to do so. At this time, Han Technician was in the meeting room of Sanctuary 1, sitting on the sofa with a tablet in his hand. Bennett sat opposite him and listened to the whole process, constantly gesturing for Han Shao to persuade the leader. Bennett did not want to see the result of both sides losing. Han Shao felt that Bennett was being naughty. If the leader had originally planned to surrender, he might have changed his mind the moment he saw him. Fortunately, the leader had been firm from the beginning, or else he would have been a little scared. Wait a minute, this logic felt weird. Bennett was waving his hands in front of him. Han Shao had no choice but to try. He did not want Bennett to spoil him like an old mother. I'd rather drag everyone down with me. The leader's tone was cold. I want the world to feel pain. Han Shao opened his mouth, but a curse was stuck in his throat. What the F***CK? Is that you? The leader sneered. I hate this world. Why do I have to think about it? Even if the Six Nations win, don't think they won't pay the price. The Six Nations are all executioners deep in their bones. They destroyed countless countries before they finally reached where they are today. They are standing on the ruins and singing praises to themselves. The winner is the king, and the loser is the bandit. Those blood debts will be buried by history, and no one will know or investigate. No one will seek justice for the old era. The surviving regimes have been free and unfettered for too long. It's time for them to pay back some interest. The leader did not care about what the world would become. He did not care about the flood after his death. He would rather betray the world than let the world betray him. Even a normal person would think this way, not to mention the leader. Han Shao did not comment. The consequences of nuclear weapons would not affect him much. He would leave Blue Star sooner or later, and the next version would be the mutation disaster. An even bigger disaster would come sooner or later. Compared to that, this climate disaster was nothing. In his previous life, the Germinal organization was at death's door, and there was a hidden danger of a comeback. Now it was eliminated once and for all, but it would bring about negative consequences in the future. He did not know which result was better, but the latter would obviously allow him to complete the grade, a main storyline mission, Dust to the Fallen Seeds, in one step. For the other Blue Star people who did not know, the latter result was the most frightening. The climate and environment were closely related to their lives, and no one wanted the environment to worsen. Bennett, who was sitting opposite him, looked anxious. He could not wait to fly to the Germinal organization headquarters and kill the leader before he triggered the button. Han Shao looked at the clock and said slowly, "There's still some time before the deadline of the Six Nations, right? Don't you want to stay a little longer? I prefer to decide my own death date." The leader's eyes were firm. He reached out to hold the nuclear launch key and started to turn it slowly. A suffocating pressure spread through the screen. The leader's movements seemed to be infinitely long. Bennett grabbed the sofa's armrest so tightly that he tore the leather. Every time the key turned, a second passed on the countdown timer of countless lives. The second hand slowly pointed to the final result. Han Shao looked at the leader's face quietly. Suddenly, he said, "I never knew your name. My name? The leader raised the corner of his mouth and revealed a ferocious smile. He said lightly, "Not important." "That's true. Then goodbye." Han Xiao sighed and waved his hand. The key turned to 180 degrees. A faint vibration sound came from the screen. It was the sound of the missile taking off. The leader retracted his hand and sat motionless on the chair like a statue. At this moment, there was no hatred in his tone. There was no regret or sadness of dying. There was no intense emotion. It was as calm as old neighbors saying goodbye to each other at dusk and returning home for dinner. He nodded at Han Xiao. "Goodbye." Warning, warning, a high-speed moving object has taken off from the Germinal Organization headquarters. All the officers in the Six Nations war room suddenly stood up in shock and anger. This was the worst outcome that they had expected. Although everyone was mentally prepared, when this moment arrived, they all found it hard to accept. The nuclear explosion would kill the hostages and cause pollution. The Germinal Organization headquarters would be razed to the ground. Countless secret technologies would be lost forever. Do we launch the anti-missile? The adjutant's voice was trembling. All the officers had no choice. Without hesitation, they all agreed. Launch it immediately. In the Germinal Organization headquarters, the ground and buildings were shaking slightly. The hidden Germinal Organization soldiers looked up at the sky through the windows. Their eyes reflected the missiles taking off one after another. The atmosphere was dead silent. Everyone understood the leader's decision and knew what was going to happen next. Crying, despair, madness, convulsions, trembling, howling, roaring, numbness, all kinds of emotions before destruction. In the distant horizon, densely packed black objects were rapidly approaching. Some of them collided with the missiles midway, while others landed on the headquarter base group. Buzz! The first sound was a high-frequency explosion that could not be recognized by the human ear. Most of the people in the Six Nations base covered their ears as blood flowed out from their ears. A pillar of fire with a diameter of tens of kilometers soared into the sky. The base group instantly disintegrated in the fire. Dark smoke and dust spewed out from the dazzling fire, slowly condensing and rising, slowly turning into a dense black mushroom. It was an extremely spectacular sight. In the Six Nations base far away, there was no room for anything else in the eyes of the people looking at it. There was only a vast expanse of white. The strong light temporarily blinded most of them. Even the supers could not help but close their eyes. No one could maintain their natural state in this destructive aura. Everyone felt small, as if they had become sand that was about to be swept away by the wind. They could not control their own destiny, and their bodies began to tremble uncontrollably. Even further away, the end of the horizon could be seen. A spear-like fire pierced through the thick clouds that had been accumulating above the Germinal Organization headquarters all year long. The clouds became a hollow ring, and the sea of clouds dispersed. Then the fire expanded a second time, and a yellow, circular blast wave mixed with dust burst out. Wherever it passed, the ground cracked, and countless buildings and metal pieces were mixed in the dust. Countless twisted iron pieces more than 10 meters in size were thrown more than 10 kilometers away by the explosion, as if they were lighter than a baseball, like feathers, and fell to the ground in the wilderness like rain. The shockwave finally swept across the camp, and an earth-shattering force surged over. It was like the breath of the wind god. The tents flew up like dandelion seeds, and the heavy vehicles were flipped over like rubber balls. Needless to say, the people were fine. Even if they broke bones, it was only a minor injury. The surrounding players were shocked and excited. They hurriedly recorded this scene, afraid that they would miss anything. Following the shockwave was a second explosion. The frequency could be captured by the human ear, and it was almost enough to break eardrums. Boom, boom. The sound was like the sky was falling, deafening. The base at the back gradually stabilized, and the troops quickly retreated far away. Only the fire that kept rising in the wilderness was left. The scene was like a punishment from the heavens. The rolling mushroom cloud was like the grin of the devil, constantly changing and twisting its shape. The leader, with his unfinished ideals and the organization that he had created, turned into a bright firework that lit up the world. The Germinal organization had typed GG. The nuclear explosion that leveled the headquarters to the ground was the last sound of the Blue Star War. The highest level of the Six Nations held an emergency meeting. The enemy was gone, but the aftermath was not optimistic. According to the scale of the explosion, the Weather Bureau has constructed a calculation model. The first batch of radioactive dust will enter the atmospheric cycle in the next 3 to 6 hours. In the next month, the continent of Andrea will enter a nuclear winter state that will last for at least half a year. It is not suitable for any creatures to survive. A large number of plants and animals will die on the land, completely turning it into a land of death. The radiation will affect the coastal area of Andrea, which may cause the collapse of the marine food chain. Some marine creatures may also undergo unknown mutations. The high concentration of radiation and pollutants will enter the ocean cycle and spread to the entire world through rain. This process will take about 300 to 500 days to complete. Then, the global climate will start to worsen. Because of the large scale, the degree of deterioration will not be as severe as Andrea, but it will still cause serious damage to the atmosphere. It will affect the whole body and cause negative effects in all aspects. This effect will last for more than 10 years. During this period of time, it is estimated that the level of civilization will not improve, and it may even regress. The upper echelons of the Six Nations had serious expressions. This was not just a matter of one country, but a matter of the entire world and the entire race. An anti-war upper echelon slammed the table and said angrily, Look, what did you do? Our troops suffered heavy losses, and we did not get any benefits after the victory. This even led to such an outcome. We should not have gone on an expedition. We should not have started a war. It would have been better to let the Germinal organization hide in Andrea. They should have quit while they were ahead after destroying their base. When they decided to go on an expedition, some of the politicians were anti-war because once the war started, resources and speaking rights would be tilted toward the military. Some of the upper echelons were naturally unhappy, but the minority obeyed the majority, and their voices were ignored. Now, they had a legitimate reason to jump out and speak righteously after the fact. At this point, let's not talk nonsense. It's better to end the pain quickly than to prolong the pain. The bitter consequences of the war had to be borne by the entire world, and it affected many innocent people. In order to get rid of this huge problem, many of the upper echelons asked themselves if it was really worth it. In the end, the answer was yes. At least in the eyes of the upper echelons, a huge enemy was more threatening than the so-called global meteorological disaster. Only by getting rid of this huge problem could they be at ease and not have to worry about it anymore. Only then could they have the conditions to develop steadily. The upper echelons of the various countries felt that everyone had to face the threat of the meteorological disaster and spend national resources to deal with it. They were still on the same starting line, which was fair to everyone. Fortunately, the result was not irreparable. If it was polluted, they could deal with it later. That was life. Should we block the news from the public? There are too many people who know about it. There's no need to. Let's announce it officially. The public will definitely protest and blame us for causing this result. It's not important. Anyway, the war is over. What we have to face now is the follow-up disaster. Let everyone know that we are in the same situation. We should put aside the past and not think about who is right and who is wrong. We should work together to get through this. Then, should the upper echelons of the various countries discussed one suggestion after another. Bennett's face was pale. He paced back and forth in the room, muttering too much and crazy to himself. Han Xiao sat on the sofa with his legs crossed, looked at the blue sky outside the window, and shook his head. The leader pressed the final note and turned the headquarters into ashes. The Germinal organization could be said to be the first big boss that he had faced, and it was destroyed by his hands. One of the main storyline of Blue Star had been destroyed by him. Han Xiao kind of liked this feeling. No matter how legendary the leader's deeds were, he was still his enemy. Han Xiao was not soft-hearted toward his enemies. A win was a win, and there was no need for the winner to feel sorry for himself. You have received Planet Legendary Point. Germinal Organization buried. Grade a main storyline mission. Fall of the Seeds completed. Grade. Unbelievable. You have received Unbelievable Grade Mission Reward. Calculating rewards. Chapter 280. Han Zhao's eye sparkled. So far, the highest rating he had ever received was excellent, and unbelievable was even higher than that. If it were a normal player, the normal process of the mission would be like this. Infiltrate one base after another and steal information to find out the location of the other bases. As the Germinal Organization's alert level increased, the enemies they faced became stronger and stronger. Every time they got the information of the next base, they had to choose between destroying the base personally or using the Six Nations. The former had a higher reward. However, he skipped the most complicated intelligence-gathering operation and directly threw out the location of all the Germinal Organization bases. The difference in efficiency was like using a scythe to harvest and a tractor to harvest. Dust of the Fallen Seeds was an A-level main storyline. Han Xiao had the advantage of being familiar with the storyline, but it still took him more than a year to complete it. It was almost like he had completed the final goal of the entire main storyline all by himself. Han Xiao was quite satisfied with the result and looked forward to the reward. A new legendary point. Han Xiaoxin was certain. This was the reward he had expected. The maximum mission reward was increased by 5%, and the total daily reward was increased by 100%. Soon, the interface was refreshed with other rewards. The personal destruction progress was almost half. This meant that in the operation to destroy the Germinal Organization, Han Zhao's effect was almost the same as the entire army of the Six Nations. All the operations of the Six Nations were supported by his intelligence, and it could be said that the information he revealed had been influencing the direction of the situation. This was an open scheme, using the Six Nations' hostility toward the Germinal Organization. As long as the Six Nations gave him a knife, they would do it. Even if the Six Nations knew that Han Xiao had the intention of killing them with a borrowed knife, they were willing to be used. In the end, Han Xiao and the Six Nations had achieved their goals. According to my mission evaluation, the probability of a random reward being a good item should be quite high. Han Xiao thought to himself. The random reward mechanism was to first draw a type of item, possibly an item, a skill, or something like that. Then, it would randomly draw a few rewards for the person to choose from. Only when the mission had a high evaluation would there be a chance for it to appear. Putting the random reward aside, he first looked at the 5 special items. You have received Character Summon Card, Germinal Organization Leader. You have received Character Summon Card, Destiny's Child. You have received Character Summon Card, Aurora. You have received Character Summon Card, Hela. You have received Medal of Honor, Germinal Organization Burial, A. Han Xiao was shocked. This was the first time he had received so many Character Summon Cards at once. The function of the Character Summon Card was to allow the user to release or temporarily possess the ability to summon a target. It was a trump card type consumable item, and if used well, it could instantly change the situation. He had only received 2 in the past. Character Summon Card, Germinal Organization Leader. Armor-piercing combo. All attacks released in the next 8 seconds will be armor-piercing critical hits, reducing the target's defense by 24%. Duration, 5 minutes. Usage, 0/12 Character Summon Card, Destiny's Child. Future Peak, predict an opportunity. Can specify items such as missions, items, a certain character's future actions, etc. Usage, 0/5 Character Summon Card, Aurora. Life return. Instantly recover to full status. Usage, 0/6 Character Summon Card, Hela. Whisper of the Dead. Deals 3 psychic attacks to the enemy. Damage depends on a user's INT or MYS, can be specified. Reduces the target's status by 15%. Duration, 3 hours. Usage, 0/8. Only Destiny's Child effect was not detailed. The other three were very simple and effective. Predict an opportunity. This meaning is very ambiguous. Could it be predicting the possibility of completing a mission and obtaining a specific item? Han Xiao had a flash of inspiration. He had the idea of leaving Blue Star, but the methods that he thought of were not very reliable. This was a good opportunity to test out the effect of Destiny's Child. Han Xiao did not hesitate and immediately used it. He silently thought about heading to the galaxy. His vision suddenly blurred, as if it was filled with a dense fog. After an unknown amount of time, a smear of black color spread out in the center of his vision, turning into an unreal picture. The background seemed to be a wasteland. A flame fell from the sky, smashing a ring-shaped crater, emitting black smoke and electric sparks. Some inexplicable information flashed through his mind. The location is, the time is, the image stopped abruptly, as if everything was an illusion. Han Xiao came back to his senses, and the information had already been imprinted in his mind. His expression changed slightly, and he thought to himself, indeed, it predicted an opportunity to head to the galaxy. This opportunity was originally one of the methods that I thought of, but I did not know the exact time. This card predicted a rough time and location, penetrating the fog of destiny, and seeing the timing of a certain event that I was looking forward to. The effect of this card was very surprising, and Han Xiao was even more confident in leaving Blue Star. He looked at the last item, Medal of Honor, Germinal Organization's Burial. Completing a high-difficulty main storyline mission and obtaining a high rating would give this Medal of Honor. Its effect was an increase of all attributes by 3%. If he collected 3 of them, he could exchange them for a special achievement badge. The effect of wearing it was an increase of all attributes by 12%. He had obtained it before and knew that the effect was impressive, so he immediately put it on. After calculating the special items, Han Xiao began to randomly give out rewards. Randomly drawing. Your reward type this time is item. Please choose one of the 3 items below. Race change card. Randomly change a race. Mission completion card. X3. Directly complete the mission and obtain the mission reward with the lowest rating. Esper potential enhancement fluid. Increase Esper potential. Good stuff. Han Xiao's eyes sparkled. Esper potential enhancement fluid was extremely rare, and Espers were willing to go bankrupt to buy it because there were only 2 ways to increase one's Esper potential. One was through rare experiments and potions in the game, and the other was the Esper potential enhancement fluid. The other 2 were not suitable for him, so he chose the Esper potential enhancement fluid and placed it on the interface. Esper potential enhancement fluid, be it sold to players or used by other characters, has a lot of potential value. I have to stock up on something like this first. It will definitely be useful in the future, Han Xiao thought to himself. The reward this time was very bountiful. Although it did not seem like much, it was because Han Xiao's standards were too high. If it were a player, 10 million experience was an astronomical figure. There were also potential points, attribute points, and the reward items were all very useful, and Han Xiao was quite satisfied. The most valuable thing was the pile of items. Dungeon spawning. 6 nations and Germinal Organization. What is this? Please select the main storyline to form the Dungeon Crystal. It can form the Dungeon Crystal. Han Xiao's expression changed drastically, and he was pleasantly surprised. After trying it for a while, he familiarized himself with the function. Simply put, it could turn many of his actions in the Germinal Organization's main storyline into dungeons and generate dungeon crystals as rewards for missions. The benefits were self-evident, and it increased the variety of rewards he could give. Han Xiao speculated that the reason for this new function should be because he could complete the main storyline with high difficulty with a high rating, which was equivalent to doing legendary deeds, and he could turn those deeds into dungeons. Some NPC missions might give him dungeon crystals. Dion, whom he had met before, had given him a dungeon crystal as a reward. Now, he had the same ability, and because of the existence of the interface, he could control the generation of dungeon crystals. He familiarized himself with it and realized that dungeon crystals could only be used as mission rewards and could not be directly turned into items to be sold in the shop. This was in line with the way players obtained dungeon crystals. Compared to the other rewards, this function was the biggest gain. It strengthened his function as an NPC and made him more attractive to players. Han Xiao was pleasantly surprised. Only legendary experiences can create dungeons. In other words, it can greatly change the main storyline of a planet or a larger area. The NPC template might have more functions, but I haven't triggered them yet. Since the NPC template had this ability, it meant that the benefits of participating in the main storyline had increased. If he could have the right to create dungeons for many major events, the players would be unbelievably loyal to him. Chapter 281. 1. After dealing with the rewards, Bennett sat down and said in a deep voice, "A war of this level will not happen again in the short term. However, after the Six Nations recover, they may start to deal with the other forces and continue to consolidate their rule. After the Germinal organization is defeated, the Darknet is one of the largest organizations left. They will deal with us sooner or later." Han Xiao put away his excitement and put on a contemplative expression. Before you have the right to speak, everyone thinks they are good people. However, the Six Nations still have to deal with the aftermath of the nuclear explosion in the short term. They won't have time to do anything else. Speaking of disasters, your shelter plan can come in handy. Bennett sighed. I would rather it never come in handy. After the war, there will be more wanderers from the outside world seeking shelter. I plan to speed up the plan and build shelters in the western and northern continents. The refugees in Andrea need to be moved. I will also send people to receive them. The Six Nations are very willing to leave this mess to us. Blue Star had two main storylines. One was the Germinal organization, which had been destroyed by him. This was the main conflict. The second was the construction of shelters. Compared to the Germinal organization war, the shelter main storyline was not as intense. The entire Blue Star would enter a stable period. There would not be any large-scale conflicts in version 1.0. Han Zhao's strength stood at the top of the planet, and he was the one who destroyed the Germinal organization. He basically had no enemies, so he could develop steadily. The Germinal organization main storyline was supposed to be a major event throughout version 1.0, where the players could show off their skills. However, it was gone in the early stages, so they could only do small things in the future. Players with chaotic tendencies naturally did not like peace, but it was a good thing for Han Xiao. He had just obtained the right to create a dungeon for the Germinal organization main storyline. He could split the war into many dungeons to satisfy the player's inextinguishable desire for battle. He could attract more players to his side and continue to increase his status. The Germinal organization has been destroyed. I have no enemies in Blue Star, so I can prepare to go to the galaxy with peace of mind. The opportunity to leave Blue Star happens to be during the Pro League, which is close to a year later. This period of time will be very stable. I need to accumulate a lot of experience. After all, there are not many players in the galaxy for me to interact with. Now that the enemy was gone, Han Xiao felt as if his tense nerves had finally relaxed. Version 1.0 would last for 3.5 years, and they could definitely afford to wait for a year. Right now, the Six Nations were immersed in the joy of victory and did not know that a calamity would soon befall them. The climate disaster caused by the nuclear explosion would probably increase the strength of the mutation disaster, and Han Xiao could only mourn for them. Over the next few days, Han Xiao participated in a high-level meeting of the Darknet to discuss their future. He was mainly a bystander and did not express his opinion. However, none of the upper echelons present dared to ignore him. As the current most powerful person in the Darknet and the biggest culprit behind the destruction of the Germinal organization, Han Zhao's fame and status had broken through the sky. The intelligence agencies of the Six Nations had taken the initiative to commend him. With this achievement, Han Xiao would be respected everywhere. If he returned to Star Dragon now, he would also receive the same treatment. On the players' forums, the end of the main storyline had attracted a lot of attention. All kinds of discussion posts flooded the forums. It was the first time that the players had participated in such a big event, and they could not help but be excited. Some players who had witnessed the nuclear explosion with their own eyes posted videos, which attracted a lot of attention. After creating such a huge scene, the players could not forget about Han Xiao after the opening ceremony. Their imaginations ran wild, and they came up with even more bizarre stories, increasing Han Xiao's fame once again. After the war ended, the Germinal Organization players lost their faction and had the chance to choose again. They could leave Andrea together with the refugees and choose which continent to go to. Almost 70% of the former Germinal Organization players chose the southern continent without hesitation. Black Phantom, we are here. The former Germinal Organization players were so happy that they almost cried. After suffering for so long, they could finally make a comeback. Who could understand the bitterness they felt every time they saw players from other continents showing off the benefits of Han Xiao? Why did not all the former Germinal Organization players come? A large portion of the remaining 30% had participated in the mission of the Germinal Organization headquarters. Han Xiao's initial favorability with them was more than 10 points, and they were in despair. Trash Germinal Organization, give me back my future. The helicopter landed in Sanctuary 3. As soon as he got off the helicopter, Huang Yu came over and stopped. What's wrong? Han Xiao noticed Huang Yu's hesitation. Huang Yu coughed and said, Your Excellency, your family is here to visit you. My family? Han Xiao was stunned for a moment before realizing that it was the Overmera family. Thinking about it carefully, after the war ended, he was an internal member of the Overmera, and he was currently the most important person in the world. The Overmera was naturally curious about his attitude and wanted to use this relationship to get on his good side. Han Xiao raised his eyebrows and said, Let him see me. 10 minutes later, Xiao Quan followed Huang Yu to the guest hall. He was the ambassador sent by the Overmera to visit Han Xiao, one of the adopted sons of Xiao Jin, and also the original brother of this body of Han Xiao. He could be considered as the so-called family. Xiao Quan was more outstanding among the adopted sons, and he was chosen as the ambassador because he knew how to judge the situation. When Han Xiao's real identity was exposed, many of the brothers in the family were in disbelief. Some of them were very angry when they thought that Han Xiao had become their elder and taken advantage of them. However, Xiao Quan did not dare to have such emotions. He was very clear about the current situation, and he could not judge the current Han Xiao with the same standards as before. Every time he thought of the angry faces of the other brothers, Xiao Quan felt that they did not know what was good for them. Black Phantom alone was far more powerful than the entire Overmera, so he did not dare to underestimate him. Xiao Quan used his eloquence to talk to Huang Yu, wanting to find out Han Xiao's attitude. Huang Yu followed Han Xiao's attitude and ignored Xiao Quan. Xiao Quan could not help but feel more nervous. We're here, let's go in. The door to the guest room opened, and Xiao Quan immediately saw Han Xiao sitting on the sofa with his legs crossed. He was staring at him calmly. Xiao Quan couldn't help but hold his breath, not even daring to breathe loudly. Xiao Han, long time no see. He braced himself and greeted him, trying to ease the atmosphere. Call me Han Xiao, Han Xiao said lightly. This was not a good sign, and Xiao Quan was frightened, so he could only change his words. You're alone. Han Xiao raised his eyebrows and said, Why is Overmera looking for me? Xiao Quan hurriedly worded his words and said carefully, Han Xiao, Father has been thinking about you and wants to see you. He hopes that you can go back, and he can explain everything that happened in the past. Han Xiao did not say anything, but stared straight at Xiao Quan. Xiao Quan only felt that the gaze was full of pressure. He lowered his head subconsciously, and small beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. You want me to go over? Han Xiao stood up and walked over in large strides, as if he was going to attack. Xiao Quan was pressured by the aura, and when he thought of Han Xiao's various deeds, a wave of panic arose. He shrank back like a quail, knocked over a chair, lost his balance, and fell to the ground. He hurriedly wanted to get up, but suddenly a shadow shrouded him. Han Xiao had both hands in his pockets, bent over, and looked down at him. His eyes were like needles, piercing Xiao Quan's heart. He half knelt on the ground, not daring to move, and looked up with a panicked expression. I think you don't understand the situation. If you want to see me, ask Xiao Jin and the others to come over themselves. Han Zhao's tone was indifferent, and suddenly reached out his hand, touching Xiao Quan. It's over, he wants to kill me. Xiao Quan's face was full of panic, and his mind was blank. His shoulder was suddenly grabbed by a hand, and there was a force that lifted him up. Xiao Quan was pulled up, and Han Xiao patted his shoulder as if he was sweeping the dust off him. Tell them what I said, word for word. Huang Yu, who was waiting on the side, opened the door, extended his hand, and said expressionlessly, Please. Xiao Quan regained his senses, but he was still scared. He did not dare stay any longer and left as if he was running away. Han Xiao sat back on the sofa and thought to himself, Overmera's visit is probably because they want to use their relationship as family to get my help, but I can use them. If I let Overmera move to Sanctuary 3, there will be even more NPC resources here. On the other side, after Xiao Quan left, he immediately reported Han Zhao's attitude to Xiao Jin, trembling in fear. He wants you to come over personally. Xiao Jin's expression was uncertain, and he let out a long sigh. This time it's going to cost a lot. In the past, Han Xiao was wearing a mask, and the two sides did not know each other's background, so there was still room for negotiation. But now that he revealed his true identity, it was the same as shedding all pretense of cordiality. All the conflicts were put on the table, and Overmera was the weaker side, so they could only keep backing down. Xiao Jin looked at Xiao Hai beside him and said with a deep voice, You better prepare how to apologize and make up for it yourself. Then he slammed the door and left, leaving Xiao Hai in the room with a panicked expression. Chapter 282. 1. After sending away the Overmera messenger, Han Xiao went to find Mad Blade and the others to experiment with the dungeon creation function. Personal test subjects were indeed useful. When he came to the next room, the four of them were not at home. Han Xiao scratched his head, took out his tablet, and opened all the hidden surveillance cameras in the sanctuary. The system filtered the faces and quickly locked onto the location of the four people. Maple Moon was learning the new formula from Yi-Etching. The green fog was rolling out of the potion, and there were a few honest-looking players standing next to her. They were probably there to test the potion. They did not know what they were going to face next. How Tion was in the arena. No, defending. As a professional guru, he had high expectations of himself and did not forget to train his skills at all times. Mad Blade was being beaten up like a punching bag by Hela. Hela listened to Han Zhao's suggestion and found an inhuman to be her training partner. She developed her superpower and beat up Mad Blade in all kinds of ways. Aurora was sitting in a wheelchair, hugging Bear Cub and watching from the side. Pork Bun was recording excitedly. He was more familiar with Mad Blade, so he was very happy to see Mad Blade being beaten into a pulp. Maybe this was what friends were like. Han Xiao went to Hela's room and called the other four people to gather. Just as he entered the yard, a black shadow flew over his head. It was Mad Blade, so without thinking, he reached out and pulled him down from the sky. Hela retracted her hand, and her floating red hair fell back down, returning to its curly waist-length hair. The red light in her eyes disappeared, and Han Xiao sized up Frenzied Sword, who looked miserable. He nodded to himself. Now, Hela had the style of persuading his sister to leave. The bear cub on Aurora's knee struggled to get up, fell to the ground, and rolled around. It ran to Han Zhao's side, hugged his leg, and climbed up. It hung around his neck like a backpack. The bear cub was fed well, and its weight had increased by almost 2 times. Han Xiao raised his hand and slapped Bear Cub away. He then looked at the combat information on the interface. Bear Cub was level 18, for levels higher than when it was first brought back. It was a claw ice bear species with good growth potential. Hela's expression was complicated. She was full of hatred for the Germinal organization, but she had never thought that such a huge organization would be completely destroyed. The hatred disappeared with the explosion. She could not help but think of the first time they met. Who would have thought that the pale and weak test subject would become such a legend a year later? Seeing her expression, Han Xiao took out his tablet, opened a few photos, and passed them to Hela. The photos were taken by the Six Nations drones. The Germinal organization's headquarters was in ruins after the nuclear explosion. After the explosion, most of them are dead. If the Germinal organization still has people left, they will only be small fries in the periphery. So, there's no need to worry about the Germinal organization coming back, unless they are tired of living. Han Xiao paused and said, "You were once a member of the Germinal organization, and you are also on the Six Nations wanted list. But now you're one of my people. The Six Nations will not target you anymore." Hela frowned. "I didn't say that I want to be your subordinate." Aurora raised her hand. "I want to be." Hela was bitter. She reached out and ruffled Aurora's hair. Aurora's hair had grown out during this time, and her short blonde hair covered her ears. They chatted for a while, and how Tian and Maple Moon arrived. Usually, when Han Xiao summoned them, it would be good news, so they were secretly looking forward to it. Han Xiao used the dungeon creation function. He thought for a while and intercepted the Dark Crow Valley operation to create a dungeon crystal. This level was suitable for the current players. LV30 Dungeon Crystal, Dark Crow Valley Operation. Introduction. Dark Crow Valley Base, a base of the Germinal organization in the southern continent, was destroyed by Stardragon and Hesla. This will be your test. Dungeon type. Backtracking dungeon current number of players cleared. 0 highest dungeon completion rate. None record holder. None dungeon crystal? The four of them looked at each other. The average level of players was around level 30, and they had started to come into contact with dungeons. So far, Blue Star had found 11 fixed dungeons, which were dungeons that could be obtained from a certain character through repeated missions. Basically, they were from various factions, and they were all small 5-man dungeons. A new dungeon meant a new opportunity. After the four of them completed the mission, a white diamond-shaped crystal appeared in their hands, and they could enter the dungeon as long as they crushed it. Mad Blade immediately said, "This is a 5-man dungeon. Let's pull one more person and see if we can get the first clear." Because of Han Xiao, the four of them often played together, and they were all familiar with each other. Hao Tian nodded. "Okay, I'll pull Yellow Sky shall stand from Sky Territory over." No one had any objections. The four of them went to the square and waited for a while. Yellow Sky shall stand ran over with a happy face. Hao Tian was his idol, and he was very happy that his idol was bringing him a play. The 5 of them formed a small team. Let's have a look at the dungeon first. Mad Blade crushed the crystal, and a mist enveloped the 5 of them, and they disappeared in the crowded square. The 5 of them were dazzled, and their surroundings turned into a dense forest. It was night, and they could not see their own fingers. The backtracking dungeon allowed players to participate in the past events. A notification appeared on the interface. You are the soldiers of the Dark Crow Valley base. Hesla and Stardragon are about to invade. Your mission is to protect the Dark Crow Valley base as much as possible. Countdown to dungeon preparation. 10 minutes dungeon objective. Survive until the end of the mission. Reward. 15,000 EXP optional mission 1. Kill 5 Stardragon or Hesla agents. Reward. 30,000 EXP optional mission 2. Protect the base from leaking the truth. Reward. 45,000 EXP optional mission 3. Pan Kwong and Jia survive in the end. Reward. 70,000 EXP optional mission 4. Defeat the Stardragon and Hesla forces. Reward. 110,000 EXP dungeon failure condition. Annihilation, what a great reward. Yellow Sky shall stand was shocked. As a core member of the guild, he was very knowledgeable. Currently, the level 30 dungeons that the players had encountered only had 2 to 3 missions, and the total reward was only 70,000 to 80,000 EXP. This dungeon had 5 missions, and the rewards were so high. Yellow Sky shall stand's face turned serious. But the higher the reward, the higher the difficulty. The other 4 of them looked at each other in confusion. Is that so? They did not feel that Black Phantom's mission was difficult. We are different. Pork Bun said sincerely. He did not have the heart to correct Yellow Sky shall stand. Mad Blade looked at the notification and said in surprise, "The dungeon will start in 10 minutes, but we can move freely now." What does this mean? This was the first time that they had encountered a dungeon with a countdown, and they were confused. In fact, only dungeons with higher difficulty would have a countdown, and the entry point would be a period of time before the event to allow the players to prepare. It was the same this time. The dungeon started when the Hesla agents were about to steal the information, and the players had a chance to stop them. If they changed the starting plot, the entire dungeon would be lowered from hell difficulty to hard. However, the interface did not mention this, and the players had to figure it out themselves. In the future, when Han Shao released this dungeon, the players in the sanctuary would have to suffer hundreds of times before they found the right way to start. At this time, the 5 of them did not know the importance of these 10 minutes, and they started the dungeon according to the rules. However, this was their first time exploring a dungeon, and this kind of compound dungeon was very different from the usual dungeons. The sense of immersion and gameplay were higher, and the difficulty was also higher. The 5 of them were in pain, but happy at the same time, and they could only follow the mission given by the base and patrol continuously. A day passed like this. On the second night, as a routine patrol, Bun Hit Dog's head suddenly exploded. Your teammate, Port Bun Beat the Dog, has died. What the hell? The remaining 4 of them were shocked and quickly looked around. However, the forest was deep and the night was dark. The wind blew and the leaves rustled, and they did not know where the enemy was. Bang! This time, it was Hao Tion's turn to get a headshot. The 3 of them were very nervous. Hao Tion's voice sounded in the team channel. The interface says that I received a fatal attack. The one who killed me is Black Phantom. The 3 of them were shocked. So this was a dungeon with Han Shao in it, and in the enemy's camp. Everyone's morale plummeted. Han Zhao's dungeon generation function was to intercept an event and automatically generate a mission. The characters in the dungeon were all mirror images, and they acted according to the original plot. They had the strength of that time, but it had nothing to do with the original person. 3 consecutive gunshots, and the 3 of them were dead. Their vision blurred, and they returned to the square. They spent a day in the dungeon, but only 10 minutes had passed in the outside world. The time flow in the dungeon was different. Dungeon Dark Crow Valley operation failed. Dungeon cooldown time, 3 hours. The 5 of them smiled bitterly. This was too difficult. They did not even know how they died. On the other hand, Han Shao saw the return of the 5 of them from the monitor. After confirming that the dungeon crystal was effective, he started to think. The dungeon crystal can only be issued through missions, and it cannot be sold for money. Its use to me is to gather more players and provide more benefits to the players. This way, it will be easier to command the players, and the players will know about my deeds through the dungeon, which will increase my status. These are all more hidden benefits. However, the dungeon crystal cannot be sold, so there's no direct benefit. Chapter 283. 1. The next day, Han Shao officially released the dungeon missions on a large scale. The players in the sanctuary were pleasantly surprised. I didn't expect Black Phantom to have a dungeon mission. Why didn't it appear before? Oh right, the German organization's main storyline has just ended. Maybe it's to let us experience it again through the dungeon, and Han Shao is the one who releases the fixed dungeon. If that's the case, it's not bad. The players in the sanctuary did not participate in the war main storyline, so it was a pity. Now that Han Shao released a dungeon related to the completed main storyline, it was undoubtedly a chance to make up for it. The players swarmed in, but Han Shao did not give them away for free this time. He had set up such a quest. The reward was a dungeon crystal, and the requirement was something called contribution points. As long as one accepted the quest and bought items, learned skills, and bought chests from him, their purchases would increase their contribution points, and they would be able to complete the quest. Since he couldn't sell dungeon crystals and couldn't generate any direct profits, he could use a more flexible method. After all, he could set the quest requirements at will and treat the dungeon crystals as additional rewards. This would stimulate more players to spend money here and increase his sales. Players who originally wanted to spend money were even more willing to spend when they saw that they could complete the instance dungeon quests. Players who wanted to complete the instance dungeon quests came to spend money and found that the items he sold were both good and cheap. Then, they fell into the trap, forming a cycle. This was a promotional method. The effect was obvious. Han Zhao's first attempt increased his sales by 30%. The results were gratifying. The most direct effect was that the area around Han Zhao became even more crowded than the subway. There were so many people around him that not even a drop of water could trickle through. After getting the dungeon crystal, the players called their friends and formed teams to clear the dungeon. The basic process was to enter the dungeon happily and come out with a dumbfounded expression. The goal of clearing the dungeon was to live to the end. When the dungeon first started, everyone died on the path of revolution. 2 days later, someone finally cleared the dungeon, but the completion rate was terrible. They did not complete a single optional mission and only had the lowest basic completion rate. The 4 optional missions were the biggest rewards. They spent money on Han Zhao to get the dungeon crystal, but they only got the lowest dungeon reward. Was this not a loss? The players were not satisfied and suffered like crazy. They were tortured until their mentality collapsed. The difficulty of the optional missions was completely different from the goal of clearing the dungeon. Wow, this dungeon is playable. Black Phantom took 8 of my HP. I'm tired. Players couldn't help but post on the forum, sharing information and videos of dungeons and brainstorming. After dying so many times, I've come to a conclusion. If I don't die under the orders of the base, it's my loss. How do I complete the optional quest? Is this really a level 30 dungeon? An expert player integrated the information and analyzed the storyline of the dungeon based on the 5 missions. This is the general direction of the dungeon. On the first night of entering the dungeon, Hesla's agents took action and false information was leaked from the base. On the second night, Black Phantom started to act. He killed the patrolling soldiers and infiltrated the base through some unknown means. That night was the key to completing the second mission. Then, the base was on alert, and traces of Black Phantom were discovered. There was a chase, which ended in failure. Following that, Hesla's troops will arrive, and the battle will begin. There is a chance to complete Mission 1 here. Everyone will be trapped in the base, and in the end, the base will explode, and you will die. If you survive until this point, you will be considered to have completed the mission. A table and video were listed here, showing the things to pay attention to at every step of the dungeon storyline. Then, the topic changed. Obviously, in this path, there is no chance to complete the last 2 optional quests. I dare to guess that there are actually 2 paths in this dungeon. One is the open path, which is the storyline that we have experienced, and the other is the hidden path, which is related to the last 2 optional quests. So far, no one has triggered them. In order to defeat the enemy's troops, I think we have to start with intelligence. After some investigation, I found a new opportunity. There is a 10-minute preparation time at the start of the dungeon, which is actually the time before Hesla's agents take action. If we stop them from obtaining intelligence, we may be able to change the direction of the dungeon storyline. However, this is a fierce battle, and no one has succeeded. Finally, a reminder to all players, do not have any contact with Black Phantom. Once you encounter him, you will die. Players were very passionate about the dungeon, and there were all kinds of analysis posts on the forum. Han Zhao didn't know the exact situation of the dungeon because although he had selected the clip, the mission was automatically generated. However, he saw the videos shared by players on the forum and knew what the players had experienced. The players are actually from the Dark Crow Valley base camp. Is it because they're in the same camp as me? So this dungeon is not difficult at all? Han Zhao was helpless. Suddenly, he had a flash of inspiration. But this is also good. The higher the difficulty of the dungeon, the higher the reward, the longer the player's passion. I am the person involved, and no one knows the key points of this storyline better than I do. I can make some targeted machines and sell them to the players to help them complete the mission. The more benefits the players receive from the dungeon, the more help it would be to him. His original intention was not to let the dungeon be difficult for all the players, and he could make a lot of money by selling targeted machines to help the players. This was a business opportunity. Han Xiao was a man of action. The next day, he mass-produced targeted machines, special helmets that could protect against long-range sniping, and special auxiliary devices that could help the players move quickly in the jungle. Once they were launched, the players who had been tortured by the dungeon immediately took a fancy to them, and they were sold out immediately. Where there was demand, there would be a market. This was the market economy, and Han Xiao was very familiar with this. He seized all the opportunities and formed a new business chain. Han Xiao was too lazy to count how many segments he had benefited from. He only knew that a lot of money flew into his wallet. As the aquamarine dollar was not a currency circulating in the universe, he had been spending lavishly on machines, materials, and rare resources. However, not only did the money in his hands not decrease, but it was also increasing at a steady rate. When Han Technician was still a player, he could not wait to split his money in half. Now, he had so much money that he could not spend it all. Even the Fabian Company's warehouse had been emptied by him, and he needed to restock. It's so troublesome to have money. Han Xiao was really worried. He did not want to bring a pile of aquamarine dollars into the galaxy as toilet paper. With the new machines, it was much easier for the players to clear the dungeon. The new machines that he had made became the standard equipment in the eyes of the players. Compared to the generous rewards of the dungeon, the cost was acceptable, and the players felt that it was worth it. At least one person in a 5-person team would have the equipment, and it was basically a necessity. As the money accumulated, Han Xiao earned an additional bucket of gold. The difficulty level of the dungeon had evolved from NetEase to 10 cent. Although 10 cent was often criticized, it was still very conscientious compared to NetEase. 10 cent. Play your D***MN**D if you don't have money. NetEase. Play your D***MN**D. That was the difference between the two. The long-term benefits of being the publisher of the dungeon are very significant. As long as I am in a place, there is no need to worry about attracting players. This is the main storyline of version 1.0. I can create dungeons that are below level 60 for a long time. I will only create dungeons in the Dark Crow Valley for the time being. When the players slowly level up, I will release new dungeons. This way, I can always satisfy the needs of the players and carry out sustainable development. Han Xiao calculated. Moreover, as more dungeons are released, the players will personally experience my experience. It will be very helpful for me to consolidate and deepen my impression of myself. I have to let the players know that other than being handsome, I have countless good points. Han Xiao valued the players. After all, if he wanted to grow quickly, he could not avoid interacting with the players. Furthermore, the players were a group of lawless people, so he did not want to stand on the opposite side of the players. Although he was ahead of the players by a lot, once the players grew up, they could still cause some trouble. This was something that he had to admit. Han Technician was not arrogant. Chapter 284. Hundreds of supply boxes were neatly stacked in the warehouse, forming a small mountain. They contained the countless parts and materials that Han Xiao had hoarded. This was the secret base under Sanctuary 3. While building the sanctuary, Han Xiao had also secretly expanded the base. It was now his secret stronghold. All the roads were equipped with identification and defense machine gun arrays. Other than fixed cameras monitoring all the entrances, there were also countless detection spiders lurking in the shadows. The security was very tight. Han Xiao had a total of 3 warehouses. One was for raw materials and parts, and the second was for mechanical equipment that he had built for practice and sold to the players. The last one was an important warehouse that stored the equipment he used. The new mechanical suit, Amphiptera, was stored in this important warehouse. The items in these warehouses were all for his preparation for interstellar travel. Recently, the dungeon function had allowed him to earn a huge sum of money, and the money was rolling in. He did not know how much money he would accumulate before he headed to the galaxy, but the good situation did not make Han Xiao too excited. He saw some problems. He was earning the players' money, so where did the players' money come from? Naturally, it came from doing missions. It came from other NPCs. In essence, the players acted as human porters, gathering the wealth of the NPCs scattered all over the place and sending it to Han Shao through spending, forming a torrent of money. When the money moved, it formed an assembly line, and Han Shao was barely the end of the flow of money. The money was safely placed in his pocket. Then, if the players wanted to earn money, they would have to work for other NPCs. If he wanted to increase the player's spending level, he had to pour in fresh water from the source and increase the NPCs in the sanctuary. There was another problem. The players would not stay in the main city forever. They would definitely go to other places to do missions and experience the storyline. To make the players return home, in addition to the various activities that were being completed, he had to make the transportation in the main city more convenient. Han Shao was preparing to build a new transportation network for the sanctuary, including railway tracks and scheduled flights. This was a very large budget that the Darknet could not afford at the moment. Bennett was developing a new sanctuary and did not have the money to spare. And these two problems had the same solution. Find a spendthrift who was willing to fork out money and people. The phone rang, and Huang Yu's voice came through. The Overmera family's visiting team is at the entrance of the sanctuary. Should we let them in? Playing with the shell, Han Shao revealed a meaningful smile. Yes, of course. A fleet of carriages was parked at the entrance of the sanctuary. Xiao Jin had personally led a group of people to pay a visit. This time, the visiting group was mainly made up of members of the Xiao faction. With Xiao Jin as the leader, there were also a group of nephews and nephews. Other than the Xiao faction, the Home faction and the Red Island faction had also sent envoys to show their attitude. The group of people were left hanging at the door for a long time, but Xiao Jin was not impatient at all. He knew that he was the weaker party now, and he was here to ask for help. After waiting for a long time, he was finally let go. He observed the facilities of the sanctuary and nodded repeatedly. He followed Huang Yu to the guest hall and saw Han Shao sitting in the main seat, sizing them up with a playful look. Without the mask, in the eyes of the members of the Xiao faction, this face was that of Xiao Han, who had been missing for a long time. However, they could not see through the current Han Shao. It was as if they were looking at a group of strangers. Xiao Jin also did not dare to call his son rashly. He cleared his throat and said in a deep voice, "Black Phantom." Han Shao glanced at the group of people. He was expressionless and did not answer. He leaned against a chair like a king of a mountain with his legs crossed. He casually played with the yellowish bullet and looked straight at the group of people. Xiao Jin understood what he meant. He looked at Xiao Hai and the group of nephews behind him and tilted his head. The group of Xiao faction juniors made a commotion. They hesitated for a few seconds before they greeted him unwillingly. "Godfather, oh, you guys are here," Han Shao said calmly, as if he had seen through the situation. Before Xiao Jin came, he must have expected this awkward relationship. This group of Xiao faction juniors must have been mentally prepared. This hesitant expression was specially made for him to see. It was a tactful reminder that this title was no longer suitable and that it was time to acknowledge him. They wanted him to return to the role of Xiao Jin's son and solidify their relationship. However, it was useless to him. He was not the real Han Shao. Han Shao was indifferent. He said, "What do you want from me?" Seeing this, Xiao Jin coughed and said, "I can explain what happened in the past. Your brother wants to apologize to you personally." Xiao Hai took a deep breath and put on an apologetic expression. He quickly went through the script in his mind. He had already thought of an apology posture when he was on the way. He had to cry bitterly, grovel, and show remorse for the conflict between brothers. That way, there would be a high chance that he would be forgiven by Han Shao. As long as the relationship was restored, Overmera would be able to firmly rely on this thigh. Even if Xiao Hai was unwilling, he would be able to brace himself and perform this act of repentance. Xiao Hai took a step forward and was about to open his mouth. Bang! Everyone was shocked. They looked toward the source of the sound. A smoking crater appeared right under Xiao Hai's feet. If he had taken a step forward just now, he would have been hit in the foot. Xiao Hai did not manage to take a step forward. He froze on the spot. The empty shell fell to the ground. Han Zhao's blue mechanical force wrapped around his finger. Black smoke came out of his fingernails. His finger acted as a firing pin, igniting the primer. He fired a bullet with his bare hands. This was so cool that even he himself thought it was cool. The power was limited, but it was enough to scare people. I don't need to apologize. Let's talk about serious matters, Han Xiao said calmly. Xiao Jin's expression changed slightly. This was not good. This meant that this was the end. They did not talk about relationships and only talked about the deal. This messed up his little plan. He had no choice but to ask Xiao Hai to step back. Xiao Hai gritted his teeth. He was already prepared to apologize, but he was not even given the chance to read the script. Han Xiao did not even look at him. A strong sense of grievance filled his heart. Xiao Jin calmed himself down and said in a deep voice, "The germinal organization has been destroyed. In the future, the Six Nations will be the dominant force. Due to the worsening climate, many wanderers will choose to leave the settlements and join the Six Nations. When the Six Nations recover, they will deal with the scattered warlords like us sooner or later, even if we were once the Six Nations' allies, unless you can find someone who can protect you." Han Xiao rubbed his chin. Xiao Jin nodded. Everything was understood without words. He wanted to plan ahead and rely on Han Xiao and the dark net. Han Xiao changed the topic and said, "You have to pay back what you owe. How did you get to this position? Don't you know?" Xiao Jin looked helpless. He originally wanted to talk about relationships, but Han Xiao only talked about benefits, just like the last time when he pretended to be Black Phantom. "What do you want?" "Money, manpower, and moving people near the sanctuary and turning it into a satellite city. It's not easy to collect debts from them." The expressions of the people in Overmera changed slightly. This request required them to give up their previous foundation. Everyone looked at Xiao Jin and waited for him to make a decision. Xiao Jin was silent for a while and decided to compromise. Okay, he had his eyes on the future. War brought chaos, but it also brought order. There would be fewer and fewer wanderers. Once the Six Nations were free, the warlord settlement model would be forcefully broken. Instead of waiting for the hounds to be cooked, it was better to find a way out early and change the family's business model. The Darknet Sanctuary was also considered settlement, but unlike the warlords, the Six Nations allowed the existence of the sanctuary. Xiao Jin thought about it and felt that this was an opportunity. He had to give up something to gain something, so he agreed. After sending everyone else away, only Han Xiao and Xiao Jin were left. The two of them discussed the specific details of the deal. Xiao Jin was obedient and kept compromising. In the end, Overmera funded the construction of the transportation line and slowly moved people from various strongholds to the sanctuary, including the refugees and wanderers under their rule. This could increase the population of the sanctuary. Overmera was a sucker that Han Xiao found. Han Xiao had no intention of inheriting the original body's relationship, but this could be used to make use of Overmera. After all, this group of people was not good people. "I heard that your Southern Continent Division is still looking for Lu Cheng. He's my friend. I know what to do." Xiao Jin sighed. In addition to Overmera, Han Xiao also planned to pull Lu Cheng over. He would not let Overmera be the only one. The sanctuary's competitors were warlords, so the Dark Net would support his actions. Chapter 285. Ever since the incident in Green Valley Town, Lu Cheng and Overmera had formed a grudge. His Black Pine settlement had been attacked many times and suffered heavy losses. Since Overmera had joined him, Han Xiao helped Lu Cheng solve this problem and made a call. "It's you." On the phone, Lu Cheng was on guard. He had also received information that Han Xiao was from Overmera. This made him very vigilant, and he suspected that Han Xiao had contacted him before. "Don't worry, Overmera won't trouble you anymore." Han Xiao went straight to the point and expressed his attitude. Lu Cheng was puzzled and asked, "What do you mean?" "Overmera is not on my side, at least not in the past. Now that they have joined me, I'll help you solve your dispute." Han Xiao laughed. "Friends should help each other." "Okay." Lu Cheng's tone softened a little. Thinking of their previous friendship, he felt that Han Xiao would not lie to him, and there was no need for that. He was just a small warlord, and Han Shao was now a legendary figure. After the war, the Six Nations will dominate the world, and there will be fewer and fewer wanderers. In the future, the warlord model will definitely be dealt with. Han Shao repeated what Xiao Jin had said. The gist of it was that the business that Xiao Jin was doing now had no future, and it would definitely collapse in the future. Brother, on the other hand, had better prospects. Don't blame me for not reminding you. Now, I have a chance to give you a hand. Lu Cheng was a little tempted. Let me think about it. After talking about business, Han Shao asked if Lei Zhenyu was still in Black Pine Settlement. Lu Cheng's answer was that he had already left. Han Shao could not help but have a thought. Lei Zhenyu was a mechanic who made the PE0 nanomuscle fiber. Old man Lu had entrusted him to help Lu Cheng. Once Lei Zhenyu left, it would be an opportunity for Old Man Lu to leave behind the 4 blueprints. Old Man Lu would try to get the information to Lu Cheng, and Lu Cheng would then send someone to Star Dragon's repair shop to get the blueprints. Although the relationship between father and son was very strained, Old Man Lu's fatherly love was as great as a mountain. Han Shao secretly shook his head as he thought of his own father and the fried meat slaps that he missed so much. Oh, not the Xiao Jin beside him. Old Man Lu's 4 blueprints were all rare items, and they had a unique style. They could be considered as a set of godly equipment in the early stages of the mechanic class. The probability of obtaining knowledge from them was extremely low, so Han Shao was quite envious. He currently had 3 types of equipment and battle systems: the Ghost Gaussian sniper rifle and electromagnetic hover boots, long-range kiting style, the all-round amphipter mechanical suit, and the mechanical pugilist style of magnetic chain split blades and electrothermal cutter. These 3 systems formed his current combat style. The other scattered machines did not count as his usual tactics. For example, the Generation 2, 5 Rangers and Turrets firepower rush style, and the elementary pure firearms long-range style, with a large number of gunpowder weapons were rarely used. Ever since the Snake series mecha had left the factory, Han Shao had very rarely gambled on new blueprints. He was well aware of the knowledge combinations of blueprints. Other than the occasional chance to try his luck, he would only spend his experience to integrate a specific blueprint when he confirmed that a certain battle strategy was required. As for Old Man Lu's 4 blueprints, they belonged to an independent new battle system, so Han Shao naturally would not miss out on them. The setting sun slowly approached the horizon, gilding the Star Dragon western capital with the color of dusk. The air was filled with a hint of melancholy as the day was about to disappear. The people on the streets were in a hurry, as if they wanted to rush home before nightfall. Han Shao slowly walked on the streets. He had been away for almost a year, and now that he had returned to the western capital, the feeling that this city gave him had changed slightly. There were more people, and the corners of the walls were still covered with anti-war spray paint. The giant screens in the buildings in the distance were rolling the news, and the content was about the victory of the war and the upcoming climate change. The city was shrouded in a heavy atmosphere, and the citizens were confused and worried about their future. At this time, Han Shao was wearing the facial simulator. He changed his appearance and wore a warm woolen coat. It was already winter, so this outfit was very low-key and ordinary. Returning to the repair shop that he had not seen for a long time, the familiar layout was still there, and his workshop was still next to the shop. Han Shao walked into the shop, and the lathe hummed. Lu Qin was focused on assembling a machine. She was alone, and Old Man Lu, who usually sat at the door, was nowhere to be seen. Lu Qin turned around and saw a customer coming in. She hurriedly put down her work and walked over with a smile. "Hello, is there anything you need?" Lu Qin still looked familiar, gentle and delicate like a spring breeze. Han Shao sized her up and said without a change in expression, "I want to customize a small thing." "What is it?" Lu Qin blinked. Han Shao took out a blueprint and handed it to Lu Qin. It was a sketch of a small metal sculpture. There was no technical requirement, only grinding and welding. Any machine shop could do it. Lu Qin looked at it for a while and nodded. "No problem. You can come and get it tomorrow." Han Shao shook his head. "I'm leaving the city tomorrow, so I want it tonight." Lu Qin was troubled. It will take about 2 hours to make this sculpture. I'll close the shop when it's dark. Then I'll have to go to another shop. Han Xiao pretended to feel pity and whispered, "Is there a modification shop nearby that takes orders of 30,000 yuan?" Lu Qian's eyes lit up and changed the topic 180 degrees. "We'll close later today. You can wait in the shop. Once it's done, you can pick it up immediately." Hearing this, Han Xiao smiled inwardly. He knew Lu Qian too well. This trick worked every time. Only by staying in the shop would he have a chance to find the box left behind by Old Man Lu. Naturally, he couldn't ask Lu Qian directly as it would arouse suspicion. At this moment, a new customer came in. It was a short-haired man. He stuck his head out and said, "I want to buy some household equipment. Do you have it?" "Yes." Lu Qian greeted the customer and pointed to the metal rack. "It's all for sale. Sorry, I have some work on hand. You can take a look yourself." He casually grabbed a stool and sat down. Suddenly, he sensed something and looked to the side. He saw that the man who had just walked in was sizing up the goods on the shelf, while secretly sizing him up, constantly observing him. Old Man Lu's identity was special. Before he left, he got people from Division 13 to take care of Lu Qian. There were always people around to protect and monitor her to prevent anyone from plotting against her. This new customer was a resident field agent who came to investigate Han Zhao's background. People from Division 13? Han Zhao's LV-70 senses were very sharp. He noticed that this man's footsteps had the characteristics of someone who had undergone military training. He guessed the other party's background after thinking for a while. His expression didn't change as he quietly observed the situation. Now that he had changed his appearance, he wasn't afraid of being recognized. As the sky gradually darkened, Lu Qian focused on her work. Han Xiao sat by the side and waited. The man kept picking from the rack and watching him. Han Xiao raised his eyebrows. It wasn't good for him to move around when he was being watched. He secretly shook his leg, and a small spider crawled out of his pocket. It followed the shadow of the corner and moved stealthily. Han Xiao took out his tablet and used his body to block the surveillance's line of sight. He lowered his head and opened the control interface of the spider. He switched to manual mode. The image of the small spider appeared at the bottom right corner of the screen. From a spider's perspective, it moved close to the ground. The detector was specially equipped with a metal detection device. The pipes hidden under the wall and the floor were all glowing red. He remembered that Old Man Lu's safe was made of metal, so he used metal detection. Half an hour later, the spider found its target in Lu Qian's room on the second floor. A portable safe was placed under the bed. Han Xiao suddenly stood up and said, "Is there a toilet here?" Lu Qian looked up and wiped her sweat. "It's upstairs." "I'll take you there." "No need. You do what you need to do. I'll go by myself." Han Xiao refused and walked up the stairs. After a few steps, he suddenly heard the field agent say that he wanted to go to the toilet. He followed him and watched him closely. Han Xiao clicked his tongue and felt that it was quite troublesome. It was not good for him to move when he was being watched. He suddenly felt evil. When he came to the toilet on the second floor, he suddenly turned around and punched the field agent in the nose with a friendly punch. The field agent could not react at all. He only felt a blur in front of him, and a searing pain erupted from the bridge of his nose. Without saying anything, he was knocked unconscious. After helping the field agent lie down silently, Han Xiao walked into Lu Qian's room, pulled out the safe from under the bed, and entered the password in his memory. Click! The safe opened. Han Xiao glanced at it. The interface notified him that he had obtained 4 rare blueprints. After confirming that there were no mistakes, he was overjoyed. He rolled up the blueprints and stuffed them into his bag. Then he took out the replacements from his bag and put them into the safe. Finally, he closed the safe and put it back in its original position. The replacements were also mechanical blueprints, but they were normal blueprints. In the future, there would be players who would go through all kinds of hardships to complete this mission. At the very least, that player would not be left empty-handed. Han Xiao felt that his conscience was so great that it touched galaxy. Carrying the field agent downstairs, Lu Qian was shocked. What happened to him? Han Xiao pretended to be disgusted. This guy wanted to go to the toilet with me. His intentions were murderous, so I knocked him out. Lu Qian's expression became strange. She looked at the field agent and mumbled, "So exciting." Han Xiao sat down calmly. He didn't panic at all after knocking out the Division 13 agent. His confidence came from his ability. Moreover, Lu Qian was an old acquaintance. He didn't want to disappear for no reason and cause Lu Qian to be worried. He chatted with Lu Qian casually. 56, please answer. 56, please answer. In a room in a building a few hundred meters away from the repair shop, a group of field agents responsible for protecting Lu Qian was on standby. The captain kept repeating into the walkie-talkie. The target was naturally the field agent in the repair shop. There was no reply. Everyone's expression became serious. *T, he's lost contact. Something must have happened in the shop. Move immediately. The captain suddenly stood up, put on a bulletproof vest and ammunition belt, and rushed out of the door with his men. Chapter 286. The cold night wind blew in through the window, and the humming sound of the lathe running filled his ears. It was a little noisy. Han Xiao casually chatted with Lu Qian. Your shop has been around for a long time. How's the business? Lu Qian's hair was tied up, and she was wearing a protective mask. She was welding metal with her head down. She did not even look up when she heard the question. The location is so remote. Of course, the business is not good. When I came in, I saw that you were quite busy. Lu Qian shook her head. I'm the only one in the shop. There's a lot of orders. Of course, I have things to do all the time. Don't you need help? Lu Qian paused and sighed softly. I did. I left. Probably because the salary is too low. Han Xiao shook his head. Is that the reason? Lu Qian's tone was suspicious. She was just an ordinary person. She did not know about those big events. Han Xiao left without saying goodbye, and there was no news about him. Lu Qian had always been brooding about it. The apprentice that she had painstakingly recruited was gone just like that. Although they did not spend much time together, Han Xiao had left a deep impression on Lu Qian. In the past, there was only her and old man Lu in the shop. With one more person, it was more lively. The time spent together was quite happy. However, after waiting for a long time, Han Xiao still did not return. Lu Qian's mood was down for a long time. Since the business is not good, have you thought of going somewhere else? Lu Qian shook her head. This is my home. Dense footsteps approached. In the night, a field team quickly arrived. At this time, the field personnel who was knocked out woke up slowly. His expression changed drastically. He immediately wanted to do a tactical roll to get up. Suddenly, a fist the size of a sandbag quickly approached him. Bang! In front of the field team, Han Xiao knocked him out with another punch. Don't move. Raise your hands. The field team raised their guns and aimed at Han Xiao. The captain shouted, We are Star Dragon's Strategic Homeland Defense Bureau. We suspect that there's something wrong with your identity. Come with us. Zong! A few cold lights flashed. The field team's gun barrels suddenly broke. The cut was smooth. The captain's expression changed. Requesting. Bang, bang, bang. Lu Qian's vision blurred. Han Xiao, who had been sitting on the chair a second ago, was now standing in the middle of the crowd. The aggressive field team fell to the ground in the blink of an eye. With his attributes, it was easy for him to knock out this group of normal field soldiers who were around level 10. The security here is too weak. I hope that Division 13 can increase the number of guards here. It would be best if the players who come here to complete the mission can't even enter the door. Han Xiao shook his head and took out several thick stacks of cash. He placed them on the table and turned to leave. Lu Qian returned to her senses and stared at Han Xiao's back. She suddenly asked, Have we met before? Han Xiao didn't even turn his head. He chuckled and said, Never seen him before. When his figure disappeared into the night, Lu Qian put down what she was doing and took off her protective mask. She brushed her hair behind her ear and suddenly smiled, revealing a knowing smile. After sneaking out of the western capital, he boarded the helicopter and returned to the sanctuary. Only then did he take out the 4 blueprints and examine them carefully. Blueprint, magnetic shield chain floating shuttle blueprint, sonic sphere, pierce blueprint, sonic sphere, shock blueprint, Sonic Sphere probed these four types of machines formed an independent combat system with both offense and defense. The three different types of sonic spheres were the core equipment. They had different functions, but they complemented each other. As the name suggested, the sonic sphere's principle was related to sound wave attacks. Ultrasonic and infrasound waves were of the penetrating type and focused on damage. Noise waves and strong sound waves were of the vibrating type and focused on control. Probe type was of the auxiliary type and was related to sonar detection. It could also increase the power of the other two types of sonic spheres. It could also transform and adjust the environmental sound within a certain area to form a special area that could amplify sound waves. It also had an MP3 function. The learning requirement of these four blueprints was LV45 and 250 INT. The required knowledge was Basic Acoustics LV5, Basic Mechanical Engineering LV5, Basic Energy Theory LV5, Basic Energy Conversion LV5, Basic Wide Area Sensing LV3, and Basic Electromagnetic Theory LV4. Han Xiao currently had 68 potential points. He spent 12 points to level up the knowledge and fulfilled the learning requirements. One day later, Han Xiao returned to the sanctuary and immediately started building. The core principle of the sonic sphere was acoustics. The most important part was the transmitter of the sound wave attack. It needed to use electromagnetic sheets to form pipes that condensed the sound frequency. According to the different sound wave attack types, the details had to be adjusted. Furthermore, connecting all these pipes together to form a three-dimensional spherical frame was very difficult. He spent a lot of time before finally building the finished product. 3 metal balls lay quietly on the bed of the lathe. They were about 2/3 the size of a human head. They were not perfectly round, but had some edges. The exterior was cold armor to protect the core. In the gaps of the armor, there were nozzles that released sound wave attacks. The original control method was hand signals and whistles. Han Xiao changed it to nerve connection control. He wore a special earpiece that converted the neuron signals within a radius of 60 meters. The signals were recognized by the receiver inside the sonic sphere to achieve the purpose of control. Get up. Han Xiao had a thought. The armor at the bottom of the 3 sonic spheres opened up, revealing black holes. They spat out white flames and flew up slowly, floating in midair. The sonic spheres had the ability to fly and could move nimbly in the air. It was a mid-range combat method. Han Xiao familiarized himself with the control method. His mind flashed. He then tested the power of the sonic spheres. He observed for a while. Sonic sphere. Pierce had an attack range of 20 meters. The Pierce type was mainly used to kill the target. The ultrasonic and infrasound pulses could cause a large amount of armor-piercing damage. They could attack the target through obstacles. The attack range was linear and inverted. Sonic sphere. Pierce had a base attack of 81 to 130. It did not seem high, but it was not. The specialty of the sound wave attack was high armor piercing. The damage reduction was very low. In addition to Han Xiao's attributes and skill bonuses, one shot could cause 350 to 400 damage. If critical hit and flaming wool were added, it would be like chasing the wind and moon without mercy. The same type of explosive damage was not inferior to the Ghost sniper rifle that had a base attack of more than 250. Moreover, the output of Sonic Sphere. Pierce was more stable than the Ghost sniper rifle. It could be used as a main battle method. Sonic Sphere. Quake was an area control method. When the sphere vibrated, it would release a high-frequency sound wave, noise wave, and strong vibration, causing stun, shock, paralysis, and other negative effects. The attack range was a circle with a diameter of 10 meters. Sonic Sphere. Probe was a sound wave amplification area with a diameter of 100 meters, increasing damage and effects. Dong. Sonic Sphere. Pierce suddenly increased its speed and created a dent in the steel wall, letting out a loud bang. The structure of the sonic sphere was very precise. It was not used to collide with the wall, because its head was tough, but to test the internal resistance of the wall. This collision took away 17 points of durability, and the durability of the sonic sphere was 1,600 points. One collision and 1% of durability is gone. If it is attacked, it seems a little fragile, Han Xiaoxin said. The three sets of sonic spheres complemented each other. The defense was done by the hovering shield shuttles. It was similar to the magnetic chain split blades, but this type of hovering shield shuttles was used for defense. In essence, it was a shield generator. The hovering shield shuttles formed a shape in the air and connected with each other. The shape formed by the hovering shield shuttles formed an electromagnetic shield. Shield technology was a common technology in the universe, but Blue Star did not have a fully formed shield technology. According to the standards of the universe, this kind of shield that could only defend one side was a prototype technology, but it was considered a very rare machine in version 1.0. He could control 4 sonic spheres at most. Any more than that, and he would be distracted, and his control would not be as precise. For a mechanic, it was not that they could use all the functions of a powerful machine immediately. Many intricate machines needed to be familiarized with before they could be used flexibly. The skill level of a mechanic was also reflected in the way they used the machines. It could be considered as microcontrol. However, for the experienced Han technician, not to mention microcontrol, he could control anything, including the sonic sphere system. I already have 4 normal battle strategies. The core system is the Amphipter mechanical suit, and the other 3 are long-range, close range, and mid-range. It should be enough to deal with all kinds of situations. I don't need a new battle strategy in the short term. Han Xiao suddenly realized that he had stolen Lu Cheng's things. He did not know what Lu Cheng's reaction would be when he received the blueprint for the replacement. Old man Lu might even come to complain. Chapter 287. Blue Star ushered in a period of peace. Time flew by, and 4 months passed in the blink of an eye. Sanctuary 3 had been completely completed. There were tall protective walls, large filtration devices to purify the air and stabilize the temperature, and self-sufficient greenhouses and farms. The goal of the sanctuary was to protect humans in times of disaster and even preserve the fire of civilization. In these 4 months, Bennett had built more sanctuaries, but none of them could compare to the scale of Black Phantom Sanctuary. Overmera and Lu Cheng moved the people over, built a satellite city around Sanctuary 3, and paid for the transportation network. Hanzhao's sanctuary could be said to be a big city. Sanctuary plan, Sanctuary 3, completed. You have received 6,500,000 EXP and 1 potential point. Performance rating. A+ darknet favorability increased by 2,500. Current relationship. Reverence 6,000. Darknet leader. A+ rating reward. Additional 250% EXP. 16,250,000. Special item X1 you have received. Medal of Honor. Sanctuary Master. This construction type main storyline missions reward was mainly EXP. Unlike the Germinal organization's main storyline mission, which had many special items. There were also no random rewards, and the NPC template did not have the right to create new dungeons. It was probably because it was a construction-type mission, so there were not many events. Although the war had ended, there were still many areas in Blue Star that could be explored. Where there were people, there would be conflicts, and there would never be a lack of events. As the players explored deeper into Blue Star, the 6 nations, who were busy digesting the effects of the war and dealing with climate disasters, became more and more wary of the increasing number and strength of Inhumans. However, overall, Blue Star's situation was stable. During this time, the main storyline and protagonists of the other novice planets began to shine, and the popularity of Blue Star cooled down. Han Xiao stayed in the sanctuary and prepared to go into the galaxy. He did not cause any trouble, and the number of times he was mentioned as the main storyline protagonist gradually decreased. Most players would only remember the fear of being dominated by him when they were buying chess. Just like what the Galaxy Times had said, when a main storyline ended, the corresponding protagonist would gradually fade into the crowd. Han Xiao was not worried at all about the fading of his popularity. His deeds had been imprinted in the hearts of the players, and he had already laid a foundation. Even if it was temporarily replaced by other hot topics, once there was another big news, it would still awaken the players' feelings for him. In these 4 months, he had collected a large amount of EXP, and there was a long string of zeros on his interface. Because of the rich interactions he had with the players, Han Technician had already established his identity as a mechanic instructor. Many new players who had just joined the game would also come to spend money. This was a long-term benefit. During this period of stability, Han Xiao lived a very comfortable life. However, he did not indulge in the pleasures of women. He did not indulge in pleasure and forget about his duties. He spent every day in the workshop building equipment and continued to train. He mastered the tactical system and maintained his peak condition. He had used the Destiny's Child character summon card and accurately predicted the opportunity to travel to the galaxy. There was still quite some time left. According to his memory, the S1 Pro League would start during this period. This was a grand event for the players. Han Xiao had been very concerned about this event in his previous life and wanted to join in the fun. Furthermore, if his sanctuary could become the venue for the Pro League, it would bring in a lot of customers. The pugilist and Esper class advancement knowledge, enhancement potions, high-level equipment, and so on that he had prepared would be able to make a lot of money. Han Xiao spent a lot of effort to cultivate the 4 rookies, Madblade, Pork Bun, Beating Dog, Maple Moon, and Hao Tian, hoping that they could get a good result in the Pro League. This way, he would be honored as well. After all, most players knew that these 4 were the lucky ones who were cultivated by Black Phantom. Galaxy Calendar Year 689, March 1st. On this day, an announcement was pinned at the top of the forum and marked red. Its popularity soared up the leaderboards at an unbelievable rate. This meant that the number of players who viewed and replied to the announcement was increasing by the minute. In less than half an hour, it became the most popular post in the entire forum. Galaxy S1 Pro League officially established. It's finally here. Han Xiao was excited. When the open beta had just started, there was news that the World Esports Association was going to host the Galaxy Pro League. After 1.5 months in real life, there was finally official news. This morning, the World Esports Association announced that the first Galaxy Pro League will officially open. This will be the most authoritative and top-level competition. It will be a grand event that belongs to the players. This will be the biggest stage for all the experts to prove themselves. Show off your skills, and the world will cheer for you. The first Galaxy Pro League has a total of 37 participating countries: China, Japan, Korea, North and South America, Eastern and Western Europe, Russia, and so on. According to the differences of the planets in the game, it will be divided into 13 divisions. They are Planet Winterfrost Division, Planet Brighton Division, Planet Longsong Division, Planet Lonely Division, and Blue Star Division. The rules of the first Galaxy Pro League are as follows. There are 3 types of competitions: single competition, and team competition. Single competition. Single competition. Players will fight to determine the winner. Single competition. Team competition. Players will take turns to fight, and the last player to stay in the ring will win. Team competition. Team competition. Players will fight in a complicated environment. They will win after destroying all of their opponents or completing special missions. First Division qualifiers. All players will be accepted. The number of players in a team must be 9, including 2 substitutes, 1 coach, and 6 players. 1 battle elimination system. Teams will fight to determine the winner in the team competition. Note: single players can only participate in the single competition. The top 38 teams and the top 62 individuals will enter the division regular competition. Division Secondary League. 18 teams will be allowed to participate, and 128 individuals will be chosen. The point system will be used, and the winner and runner-up of the team competition and the single competition will be qualified for the division regular competition. The top 40 teams in the regular competition and the top 64 individuals will be chosen. Preseason competition. Players will warm up and take turns to fight. Winning or losing will not be counted. Second Division regular competition. Point system. Teams will fight in the single competition and the team competition. The top 8 teams in the team competition and the top 16 in the single competition will enter the finals. If a team member enters the top 16 in the single competition, the team will be awarded extra points. At the same time, the team and the individual first in the team competition will be invited to the international exhibition competition. International exhibition competition, all-star competition, the top teams in the division regular competition will compete with each other. Winning or losing will not be counted. Third division final competition. Fight in pairs, best of 5. The division champion will be awarded the division trophy. The division champion, runner-up, and runner-up will enter the international regular competition. Fourth division international regular competition, point system. 3 strong teams from each division will fight in turns. The top 8 teams in the team competition and the top 16 individuals will enter the international finals. Final division international finals. Fight in pairs, best of 5. The world champion will be decided. The venues for the single competition and the single competition are as follows: Winterfrost Planet, Crevice Canyon. Brighton Planet, Floating Island Academy. Blue Star, Black Phantom Sanctuary 3. Registration for the qualifiers and secondary league will be held today. I hope the players will get the best results. S1 Galaxy Pro League is officially established. No matter which planet it was, the passion of all the players was boiling. The entire world rejoiced in this grand occasion. Seeing that Sanctuary 3 was the venue for the Blue Star competition, Han Xiao let out a long sigh of relief. Then he became excited. It was as if he saw a tsunami of leaks gathering and drowning him. The arena was too suitable for the single competition and the single competition. Plus, he had opened it to the players. With such a good venue, the chances of it becoming the venue were extremely high. The Pro League was such a huge event being held in his territory. This was a huge business opportunity. The competition format for the first Pro League is the same as I remember. Because it's the first Pro League, there are only 3 types of competitions. There will be more in the future, Han Xiao thought. As expected, it's still the qualifiers, regular competition, division final competition, and international finals. The first, second, and third place of the division final competition and the first, second, and third place of the finals all have very high bonuses. The big clubs are the main players of the first Pro League. Normal players can only achieve some results in the single competition. It's actually easier to become famous and become a star player in the single competition. When some of the normal players show their strength, clubs will sign them, and they can become professional players in the next Pro League. Han Xiao nodded. He had experienced it personally. As a famous player in the mechanic class, there were clubs that had sent him invitations, but he had rejected all of them. Everyone had their own ambitions. He did not like the tough training of a team. Playing games was more suitable for him. Han Xiao touched his chin and thought to himself, if it's the first Pro League, I remember that China's results were average. North America or Europe won the championship. I think it was France or Canada. At this time, he was living in a tall building in the middle of the sanctuary. Looking down, the atmosphere of the players in the square had changed. They were excited, expectant, and nervous. It's starting. Han Xiao also felt a little excited. Chapter 288. The registration for the qualifiers has started. The club has selected the other members and urged us to go back and practice. Old Hao, this is the name list of the other 3 members and the 2 substitutes. There were 3 people in the chat, Hao Tian, Sleepy Winter, and Twinkle Fried Rice. They were all professional players under Long Sky. The 4 biggest esport clubs in China were Temple of God, Long Sky, Dynasty, and Fried Eggplants with Fish. Seeing these names reminded the players of the glorious history of these clubs and the history of Radiance on the podium. The biggest clubs all had their own pillars, such as Ligu in Temple of God and the Troika in Fried Eggplants with Fish. Hao Tian and Sleepy Winter were both veterans of Long Sky and were known as the 2 stars of Long Sky. In recent years, there had been a new batch of young players with potential in the youth training camp. and Twinkle Fried Rice was the most favored to succeed him. Hao Tian, Sleepy Winter, and Twinkle were the core members of Long Sky. This time, the competition required a total of 8 members. Hao Tian was undoubtedly the leader, and Sleepy Winter and Twinkle were definitely members. The other 5 would be selected from within the team. The winner would form the first seed team with the 3 core members, and the rest would form the second seed team. Hao Tian looked at the name list and said, "These members are all veterans. With some practice, they should be able to get back to their competitive state. There's no problem with the candidates, so there's no need to change them." He was a super god who had played for the club for many years, and his voice in the competition was sometimes higher than the coach and manager. Sleepy Winter nodded and said, "The first competition is very important, and I hope we can get a good start. I've seen the competition format, and there are 5 stages. The competition will be very long, and we have plenty of time to prepare and continue to level up. The first batch of players is almost level 50, and by the time the finals start, most of the remaining teams will be at level 50. The qualifiers are the first stage, and all players are accepted. The competition is the most intense, and there are at least a few thousand teams in a division fighting for 38 spots. Think about how scary the competition is. Because of the large number of people in the qualifiers, it's a one-match elimination system. If we're unlucky and lose to a strong opponent, we won't be able to enter the regular season, so we have to be careful from the start. All of our opponents can be roughly categorized into 4 types: passers-by and idle, strong passers-by, strong club teams, and powerhouse teams. Our biggest opponents are the other 3 powerhouses. I predict that the club teams will take up more than 3/4 of the top 40 spots in the regular season." Hao Tian said in a low voice, "Team battles are ever-changing. Don't underestimate any team." "Old Hao, are you going to participate in the individual competition?" Sleepy Winter asked. "Yes." "Then I won't go." Sleepy Winter shrugged his shoulders. He was very clear about Hao Tian's strength. There was a very high chance that he would be able to obtain a placing in the individual competition. This would increase his team's points in the regular season. Basically, every club would send their strongest to participate in the individual competition. As the other member of the 2 stars of Long Sky, since Hao Tian was going to the individual competition, he would focus on the team and do his job. At the same time, Mad Blade also submitted his application for the individual competition. Unlike a powerhouse like Long Sky, the Rivervale club that he was in was truly a small team. There were just enough players in the club, and there were no other rotations. The members were all third-rate players, and only Mad Blade was slightly famous. However, he was not the leader. The leader was another player, Lone Crane, who was trained by Rivervale themselves. However, he had no achievements at all. Rivervale was a weak team. They had taken a liking to Mad Blade and signed him as a strong addition. After he joined, the team barely regained some vitality. Lone Crane, however, did not like Mad Blade and felt that Mad Blade was a threat to his position. Where there were people, there would be competition. The management rules of some small clubs were not as perfect as those of the big clubs, and it was not uncommon for them to be ranked based on seniority. Before they had any concrete results, the professional players were all a bunch of prideful people. Frenzied Sword was lucky enough to be chosen, but he was ostracized by his team. His application for the individual competition had been rejected by Lone Crane many times. Lone Crane's reason was very noble. The team needs to preserve its strength. You are our trump card. If you reveal too much information in the individual competition, the other team will come up with strategies to counter our team. The application was only approved after the higher-ups spoke up. Mad Blade did not have high hopes for this bunch of small fries at all. It was impossible to rely on such a team to obtain results. He placed all his hopes on the individual competition. As long as he made a name for himself in the individual competition, his position would be stable. He really did not want to fight with others. My current win rate against God Hao Tian is 4-6. He is a top god. If I can achieve a 40% win rate and enter the top 64, I should have a good chance. Mad Blade was very confident in his own strength. He had obtained a huge amount of EXP from Han Zhao's mission. and his level was one of the highest among all the players. His skill level was also very high, and all his equipment was limited edition from Black Phantom's shop. Mechanical pugilists were very reliant on equipment. His equipment was basically blue, and even his weapons were purple. His machinery was also beyond the knowledge of normal players. The so-called limited edition was actually a machine that Han Xiao had made for him. He trained the four of them in all aspects. Strictly speaking, Mad Blade, Maple Moon, Hao Tian, and Pork Bun could be considered his disciples. Mad Blade was very clear that his strength was mostly due to Black Phantom's hidden storyline. Every time he thought about it, he felt very lucky to have met Han Xiao during the closed beta. I must get a good ranking. Frenzied Sword cheered himself on. The registration for the qualifiers was in full swing. Every club moved frequently, and a large amount of news was spread on the forums every day. It was very lively, and the players were very excited. This was a carnival, and the players were looking forward to seeing their idols compete in the professional arena. They were looking forward to seeing the top-level battles. Now that players could travel across the ocean, countless players gathered in Sanctuary 3. Sanctuary 3 was the venue for the singles competition. Other than the players who registered, there were also many players who came to watch the battles. The number of players in the city was constantly increasing, and it took in a huge amount of people every day. The number of players participating in the singles competition was the highest. After all, most players knew that they could not beat the professional clubs in a team, and it was not easy to gather a team. In comparison, the singles competition was much easier and one person could register. According to the official announcement on the forums, more than 100,000 players from each division had registered for the singles competition. It was obvious how intense the qualifiers would be. The players participating in the competition were basically the first few batches of old players who entered the game. The new players who joined later were only around level 20, and it would be a waste even if they participated. Some people complained about the competition system and felt that it started too early, but their voices were quickly drowned by the sea of people. The open beta had been the game for 8 months. According to the competition schedule, the division competitions would last for about half a year, and then there would be a preparation period and a break period of close to a year before the international competitions. Such a long break period was mainly to give the qualified teams more time to practice and show the importance of the international competitions. They also used hunger marketing to increase the influence of the competition and would not start the international competitions hastily. The competition schedule was about 2 years in the game, and the whole version 1.0 time was 3.5 years. The new players who did not make it in time could only blame themselves for not playing earlier. Time waits for no one. Maple Moon did not sign up for the qualifiers. She was a casual player and a soft girl, so she did not pay much attention to the competition. She was completely clueless about the competition and was content to be a spectator. Of course, Han Xiao would not force her to join the competition. Furthermore, mechanics like Maple Moon, who focused on manufacturing, were indeed very weak in version 1.0. Pork Bun and Beating Dog contacted their other streamer friends and formed a streamer team to participate in the competition happily. In Han Xiao's eyes, this streamer team was guaranteed to be a suicide mission. If they could make it into the regular season, he would swallow 10 energy crystals on the spot. Then, there are only 3 people under my banner who will participate in the competition: Hao Tian, Mad Blade, and Pork Bun. I can ignore the last one. Han Xiao stood in front of the window, overlooking the crowded square, and thought to himself, I hope the 2 of them can get a good result. The registration period was the brewing period of the competition, and it was also the best time for him to earn a lot of money. There were 100,000 players in the individual competition, and they were willing to spend money and experience for a little bit of improvement. A gratified smile appeared on his face. Chapter 289. The first season of the Pro League was in full swing. Galaxy Times released the latest episode, analyzing the overall trend of the competition. It received a lot of attention, and the viewership was the highest in history. Han Xiao clicked on the video. This episode was obviously different. The comments were denser than before, and the duration was twice as long. One look at the progress bar, and one could tell that it was full of content. As usual, after the opening joke, the hosts entered the main topic. The first season of the Pro League is here. Registration for the qualifiers is open. Players, are you ready for this grand occasion? The bullet screen was filled with the words, "Always ready." The male host said, "From this episode onwards, we will continue to bring you a comprehensive analysis of the competition. This episode will include an explanation of the competition system, an analysis of the competition schedule, and introductions of the strong teams in each division. We have also invited the leaders of the 4 biggest clubs of China to the studio." All right, let's start with a small advertisement. Don't go away, the highlights will be back soon. Then, the advertisement that was not small all played for 5 minutes. When the comments started to argue about which brand of baby diapers was better, the faces of the 2 hosts finally reappeared. Han Xiao had a helpless expression. No wonder this episode was so long. Welcome back. The Pro League is divided into 13 divisions, corresponding to 13 novice planets. The strongest teams of each planet will be selected, and the club alliances of some strong esports countries will choose their headquarters. This is equivalent to choosing the main division in advance. The 2 introduced the situation of each division and which strong countries there were. Every time a strong team from a different country was mentioned, there would be a large number of comments shouting the team's slogan. Every strong team had a large number of fans around the world. When they talked about the Blue Star division, the comments were the most intense. After all, this was the Chinese version of Galaxy Times. Blue Star is the main division of the Chinese clubs. We have invited guests to analyze the Blue Star division for us. Let's welcome Li Gu from Temple of God, Second Prince from Dynasty, Hao Tian from Long Sky, and Sun Eggplant from Fried Eggplants with Fish. The comments were in an uproar. Who did not know that the 4 biggest clubs were rivals? It was a rare scene to see all of them gathered together. These 4 were all big shots of the biggest clubs and had a lot of fans. Since they were also rivals, the comments quickly turned into a joyful fight. Li Gu is so cool. Temple of God is trash. Fangirls, back off. Don't stop me. I want to bear Li Ge's children. Brothers, we can't lose. F***CK Tian Tian. I want to bear your children too. Sun, 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 sun. A pillar holding up the sky. The facial paralysis sect will send you to immortality. Why is 2 Clubhead here? Where's the boss of Dynasty? I want to see China's #1 expert. That's too much. How can you call him second Clubhead? You should call him second son. With all due respect, all of you here are cowards. My big brother, forgive me for being blunt. I'll kick you when I see you. Sun Eggplant, Sun Deity. 4 professional gods with their own specialties appeared on the screen. Li Gu had a warm smile on his face, and he was the most handsome player of the game, so he won the MVP award. Next to him was Hao Tian. He was expressionless and did not smile. He was like a rock, the kind that came out of a latrine, smelly and hard. Second Prince was one of the famous players in the Dynasty Club. He was very arrogant. He raised his head and combed his hair with his fingers. His posture was very arrogant, and he could not wait to point his nose at the camera. He explained what it meant to be arrogant. Among the 4 of them, Second Prince had the most anti-fans. The #1 Almighty in Huaxia belonged to Dynasty. He was very mysterious and almost never appeared on the show. Second Prince liked to talk bad about his Almighty on the show and did not hide his ambition to replace him. However, he was hung up and beaten by his Almighty many times and was treated as a joke. Although he did not change his personality, he did not drag his team down in the competition. Therefore, although he insulted others, it was mostly a joke. The last one was Sun Eggplant. He was the last member of the Troika of Fried Eggplant with Fish. I know what you're thinking. The combination of these 3 people's IDs was indeed Fried Eggplant with Fish. Sun Eggplant was a middle-aged man wearing a pair of sunglasses. He had a sloppy look on his face as he crossed his legs and shook them non-stop. He had one hand behind the back of the chair, and he looked like a big boss. He even had a toothpick in his mouth. If there wasn't a rule against smoking in front of the camera, he definitely wouldn't be holding a toothpick. Li Gu smiled. Thank you for the invitation. Speaking of which, this is the 4th time I'm on the Galaxy Times. Thank you for coming to the Galaxy Times, the male host said. Then, let's invite the 4 experts to explain the situation of the Blue Star Division to the audience. They started to analyze. Li Guan's second prince spoke the most. Hao Yin was silent and did not speak at all. Sun Eggplant bit his toothpick and occasionally added a few words. The Blue Star Division was the home ground of China. There were dozens of clubs in total. Other than the Big Four, there were also large clubs such as Thunderstorm, Fanatics, Nine Gates, and so on. There were also many strong professional players. After a round of comments, it was as if they were discussing the heroes of the world. However, in their words, the Big Four were still the most promising teams. There were 13 novice planets and 37 participating countries. The small countries did not have the ability to choose their base camp. There were also some foreign clubs active in the Blue Star Division. Although there were not many of them, they were very strong and could not be underestimated. Although the so-called base camp planets were self-proclaimed and could be played by any country, this was the territory consciousness that the players formed spontaneously. Han Xiao remembered that some clubs would send experts to other divisions and pretend to be passers-by to form a team and defeat the local clubs to gain the right to appear. This way, the local players would be embarrassed, just like a challenge. Alux, who he had met before, was such a challenge. The preliminaries are the most intense stage. The average participant is around level 40, and they haven't reached the maximum level yet. The one-battle elimination system means that luck will play a part in this, but the longer you stay, the more battles you will have to go through. Even we don't dare to say that we have absolute confidence in every battle. The element of luck will be greatly reduced, and the last 38 players will definitely be strong teams that have gone through real trials, Liga said. Second Prince mocked. That's because you guys from the Temple of God are too weak. We, Dynasty, have absolute confidence. Whoever meets us can only wait for death. Liga smiled, but he was cursing in his heart. He decided to ignore this idiot and turn to Hao Yin. He smiled and said, "Old Hao Yin, can you fulfill your dream this time and become the international champion?" "Everything depends on effort," Hao Yin said concisely. Second Prince scoffed and said arrogantly, "Save it, all of you. Dynasty will definitely be the champion." Sun Eggplant glanced at him and said, "Coward." Second Prince turned around and glared at him. "Old Hao Qingge, do you want to be taught a lesson?" Sun Eggplant pretended to roll up his sleeves and looked like he was going to pull out his sword and chop him. "Barbaric." Second Prince shrunk his head and muttered angrily. The 4 of them interacted, and the bullet screen was flooded with comments. This episode analyzed the competition in detail. At the end, the 4 of them promoted their team's preparation and expressed their high fighting spirit and determination to become the champion. Han Xiao shook his head. Although none of them looked serious, they were all professional gods. They were the kind of people who could kill anyone in the competition. Who could stop them? Through this episode, the first season of the Pro League, in his memory, came alive again. The registration for the qualifiers ended quickly, and the official start of the competition was 3 days later. All the participants were nervously preparing. At this time, the sanctuary accommodated hundreds of thousands of players. They were squeezed around the arena, and the square was almost overcrowded. Looking down at the square, the scene of a hubbub of voices came into view. 3 days to the start of the competition, Han Xiao turned around and went downstairs. Chapter 290. The sanctuary was packed with people. Other than the participants, there were also spectators. It was more than 10 times livelier than before. The players' stalls could almost line up from the square to the city gate. The whole city was in a frenzy. The division tournament was a big event for players all over the planet. Those who were not there could watch the broadcast on the forums. There were 3 days before the tournament, and one day was the fixed time for Black Phantom to open the chests. A large number of players came to the sanctuary personally. Other than wanting to watch the tournament, they also came because of Han Xiao. The place where he usually appeared was already surrounded by a group of people. A male player stood outside the crowd and tiptoed to look into the circle. "It's about time," the male player mumbled softly. The male player's ID was Jingja. He was a LV-20 novice mechanic player, one of the inconspicuous spectators. At this time, in this chaotic sanctuary, he was basically no different from a human background. He was a small, transparent character. He knew about Han Zhao's various functions from the forums, so he wanted to buy some low-level equipment. His purpose was different from the people around him who were waiting to get their hands chopped off. There would be such newbies every once in a while, giving Han Technician a steady stream of income. After waiting for a while, Han Zhao drove the truck over and stopped steadily after a 270-degree drift. He dusted his hands and jumped out of the truck. The players who were waiting at the side immediately swarmed forward and fought to buy the boxes. There were limited chests, so Jingja was pushed around by the crowd. After the boxes were sold out, the crowd dispersed. Jingja finally heaved a sigh of relief. Seeing that Han Zhao was still there, he immediately got up and jogged over, expressing that he wanted to learn a skill. As expected, he saw the shop list. "So many machines, seems like I can learn skills too. This NPC has so many functions. I heard that he used to be the main character of the storyline. Very awesome." Jingja was a newbie. He only started playing after the Germinal Organization main storyline ended, so he did not know much about Han Zhao's past. The items in the skill shop made him very excited. When he scrolled to the bottom, Jingja's eyes widened. This is the advanced knowledge of the pugilist and esper classes, gas burst, and level 2 genetic chain endurance enhancement. Both are priced at 30,000 EXP. Jingja was very surprised. Isn't Black Phantom a mechanic instructor? Why is he selling the advanced knowledge of the other two classes? Unfortunately, he had no use for it. Jingja felt that it was a pity. He took a screenshot and posted a post on the forum. Then, he continued to browse the other products. However, he did not expect that his post would cause such an uproar. All the knowledgeable players were shocked. Jingja did not understand the scarcity of class advancement knowledge, but the veteran players were very clear about it. They had to raise their relationship with the Six Nations to reverence before they could exchange for class advancement knowledge. Currently, almost no one could do that, but Han Zhao had put it up for sale without any warning or conditions. There is only one sentence that could describe how the veteran players felt about Han Zhao. This kid was actually so terrifying. After a few months of silence, Han Zhao's name once again dominated the headlines. Jingja was stunned. He didn't expect that a random screenshot and post would cause such a huge response. However, the scene that shocked him was yet to come. From afar, countless players rushed over after hearing the news. As far as the eye could see, they surrounded Han Zhao so tightly that not even a drop of water could escape. After confirming the existence of the two types of advanced knowledge, the players in the square were in an uproar. Black Phantom was as awesome as always. He was the blessing of the players. Suddenly, there was a commotion at the periphery of the crowd, and a path was automatically opened. Famous professional players walked in one after another. Li Gu, Hao Tian, Sun Eggplant, and so on, all gathered together, shining brightly. The Pro League was about to start, and the appearance of the class advancement knowledge was like rain from the sky to the professional players. No one dared to be left behind, so they all rushed over. Dozens of famous professional players surrounded Han Zhao. It was a sight to behold. The surrounding players rarely had close contact with their idols, so they were unable to contain their excitement. They all screamed and cheered, and their voices soared into the sky. Jingja was completely stunned. A random post had attracted a bunch of professional players. He was used to being invisible and had never experienced such an experience. He was so excited that his whole body was shaking. These professional players led the way and bought the class advancement knowledge. Han Zhao looked at the experience on his interface that was rocketing up, reaching a few million every minute. He was overjoyed. I didn't waste my time hoarding the class advancement knowledge until now. What a huge profit. Han Zhao was secretly happy. He had expected the class advancement knowledge to be so popular. In version 1, 0. The prerequisites to obtain class advancement knowledge were very strict, and it was difficult for players to obtain them. However, he directly sold them without any prerequisites, so it would definitely shock all the players. His class advancement knowledge of 2 classes came from the Germinal organization's mainframe. Now that the Germinal organization had flown away, the class advancement knowledge in his hands was the only one in the Blue Star organization. Hundreds of thousands of players gathered in the sanctuary. Excluding the mechanics, players who did not have enough spending power, and players who did not have enough potential points, as long as 1/10 of them bought the class advancement knowledge, he would still make a huge profit. The price was set at 30,000, which was not a high amount for the current players. Han Xiao wanted to make a small profit because the participating players had spent most of their experience to increase their combat power and level up. There were only 3 days before the start of the Pro League. If the price was too high, he would miss out on those who could not afford it. Han Xiao sold the class advancement knowledge for a few hours until the sun started to set. Only then did he end the day. He looked at the interface and saw that he had earned 300 million experience on the first day. In the past 4 months, Han Xiao had accumulated more than 500 million experience through various activities. This time, it had increased by more than half. Players have a stronger demand for class advancement knowledge. The first few days are very profitable, but after that, the profit will decrease. However, just like other skills, it can last for a long time. Han Xiao opened the forums. The Blue Star section was filled with posts about class advancement knowledge. Many people were analyzing why he, a mechanic, would suddenly sell the class advancement knowledge of the other 2 classes. The impact of this move even affected the sections of the other planets. The players of the other divisions were shocked and pressured. The relationship between the divisions was competitive. The Blue Star side easily obtained class advancement knowledge, which was very disadvantageous for the other planets. This caused a lot of discussion among the players of the other planets. Han Xiao was very famous on the Blue Star and occasionally made guest appearances in the Galaxy Times. However, most of his fame was limited to the Blue Star. This time, his fame spread to the other planets, and the players of the other regions started to remember his name. Blue Star legendary NPC, planet storyline protagonist, Black Phantom, Han Xiao, opened the chest. In fact, every planet had its own storyline protagonist. When participating in the main storyline, the storyline protagonist would be very active. However, as a storyline protagonist, Han Xiao was very different. He was completely unlike the other protagonists who frequently provided one round of main storyline mission after another. However, his functions were extremely rich. The Blue Star players received countless benefits from him. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.